Good afternoon, family. Welcome to Shumimasen, the podcast of culture and of the future. Today is a special one. It is part one of a two-part series we are calling the Dungeons and Degenerates Special. As always, I'm your host, guys, and we have Ray and Taylor. Hello, boys.
Hey, boys.
Hello,
how are you
how's it going?
doing?
Hello. More excitingly than these two absolute degenerates, today we have a professional dungeon master with us and a very, very good friend of myself. We call him VITS. We call him Voice in the Sky. We also call him Max in real life. Hello, Max. How are we?
Hey y'all,
Hey, Max. How are you?
doing good today. Doing good
Yeah.
today.
How is it in Singapore, Max?
Really hot as usual.
Yeah, I bet. Is it monsoon season yet?
Not really. Not
Not
quite.
really. So it's
In
just
about a
getting
month, maybe.
humid leading up to the monsoon season.
Yeah, in about a month, I think.
That's crazy. Because that's like humid hot, right? That's like,
Oh,
like
bro, it's
Oh,
so
no,
hot.
yeah.
It's
The
so
fucking worst.
yeah.
Telex from Malaysia. Do you remember monsoon season in Malaysia, T?
Oh, mate, don't get me started. Of course I remember.
It's
that.
insane, right? Like it's like one day it's sunny and then it just pours for like 5 days non-stop. And you're like,
It just feels so wet. You're just like, how can this place suddenly get so wet? And it's
I
like,
know,
fuck this
I know,
shit.
and the humidity actually makes you feel like you're
Yeah.
like you can't breathe. Like genuinely, whenever I go back from NZ, I like can't breathe for the first day. Like I feel like I can't breathe. It's like,
That'll
oh my
be-
god, the air feels heavy. Oh
Is
my
that worse now with all the mandatory mask wearing and all that shit? That would be worse. Imagine
Oh,
a humid
fuck.
air and then mask as well. Just like, what the
That's
fuck?
basically what's happening now, yeah.
Is
That's
it mandatory in Singapore like everywhere, Max? Or is
Yep,
it just
it's
like
still
right.
mandatory.
So the minute you step out of the house.
Basically.
I
Oh,
can
outdoor
imagine.
as well.
Well, the thing is, like NZ, I mean, let's be honest, the land to like population ratio is not very dense, right? So like, you can probably get away with not wearing it going to the park and shit. But
Mm.
Singapore's like fucking, the same amount of people as NZ in the size of like Lake Taupo, meaning
Oh,
that like
true.
you go out, you're gonna see someone, bro. Like the chances
True.
are there's gonna be like 5 people in front of you, and like it makes sense that you would have to wear a mask like everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, it's insane. I don't know if I could go back. It's just so hot, man. It's so hot. I
That's our
suffer
life.
doing something.
That's just our life here.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think people get used to it, right? Like after a while, you like 3 months or so, you probably just adapt. You kind of have to.
To be fair, like coming from London, like during summer where there was a heat wave,
Mm.
in general it was okay. Like it was obviously hot, but when you try to catch the underground trains, holy fuck! Like the
Is it real like dense and yucky in there? Real,
dude,
like,
it's just
muggy?
humid, hot, and it's like the trains
Ugh.
are obviously really hot as well. And there's
Oh.
like people fainting in train stations and shit because it just gets
No
ridiculously
shit.
hot.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's
What
so,
about
it's
the
so
ventilation and like the AC and all that?
nah,
Does it
no,
work?
because most of the trains don't really have AC. There's like ventilation, but it's not like air conditioned because it's underground, right?
Yeah.
So because it's so clustered, because everyone's going to work and all this stuff, especially on the weekends, it gets so busy that certain lines, just the temperature is hotter in the trains than it is outside.
That's crazy.
Right. So
That's
it's like
crazy.
it's like you go down and you're basically like in a swimming pool.
But does that happen in like SG or like Malaysia or anything as well, like in Hong Kong and stuff? I don't think it's that cheap. I don't think Hong Kong is.
Well, I've never heard of someone fainting in Singapore from the heat, to be honest. But at the same time, I've
Well,
I've
that
never
only
heard.
happens in like army.
Yeah, exactly.
Army.
Like I also haven't heard about it. I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if I heard about it.
Oh,
I'm like, yeah,
actually-
holy shit, yeah.
Actually, hang on, Max. Were you in the army as well?
That's how we met. Actually, that's how I know Max. We met in the
Oh, shit.
army. Same with Ash. Ash from 2-3 episodes ago was part of like our little crew of gamers. But we all played like very different games at the point, I think.
Yeah.
Actually, Max was the one who I think it was Max or Ash who introduced me to BioWare. Which is
Oh, wow.
No, that was
yeah,
probably me because
Yeah.
Ash was a really big, like, just pure Japanese games gamer right back then.
Full weeb.
Yeah,
like
right
a
up
full
Ray's street.
weeb, and, like it was me and another one of our friends called Matthew that was like, no, bro, you
Oh
have
my
to try
God,
like
yes.
BioWare, Mass Effect, and shit like that.
Yeah, and
then
that
he
started
did.
the whole obsession with it. Oh my god, man! It's been
Yeah,
like
then
what?
he did, and then it kind of like opened his eyes to the
To-
Western side of things. I think.
Good
That was
thing.
10 years ago now. Almost 10
Yeah,
years
it's
ago.
10 years ago.
No,
bro.
it was 10 years ago now.
It was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I've known Max
That's
for a while.
crazy.
we actually it was actually through gaming, all in the army. Like it was just a group of us who just play games, and then gamers like tend to
Yeah,
end up
flock
talking to each
together.
other about games and shit. Yeah, that's literally how it is. And then we just stayed in contact on like Messenger ever since. But yeah, it's been a decade, which is insane because that means we're old as fuck, man.
I'm trying to picture you guys in like service playing games at the same time. I just can't put it together.
So like in the army, right? That we have what we call duties. So like you have to like stay there overnight or whatever, right? And
Right.
like all we
Kinda like
did,
ship work.
all I did was bring my PS3 in during these overnight things and fucking jam like literally like 8 hours through the night of I don't know,
What if
you
someone
name it,
caught
whatever
you?
game
You'd
and
be
shit.
fucked.
Bro, it's so good, man. Yeah, but if someone attacked us, we'll probably die and lose the war instantly because I'll be like sleep lagged. But it was worth it. It was worth it because these duties, you sit in an air conditioned room and you just fucking plug your PS3 in and you just play games. It's so good. It was actually so good. I don't think the army that Max and I went through was the same army that most people go through. I'm gonna be honest, because it was pretty
Singapore.
shit. But at the same time, it was pretty chill in some aspects. Yeah, in Singapore.
Big-
Where else?
I'm trying to compare what other army.
Fucking where else, bro? Yeah, like but to be fair, I don't know about other armies in the world. I know they're probably not as easy.
Spicy.
I think we had it pretty easy, Max.
I would say so.
Yeah, it was
I
pretty
think so.
chill, pretty chill. All right, before we go off on our usual 45 tangents, we should probably get back into this D&D special, which, by the way, means Dungeons and Degenerates, as I have said already. Max, the first thing we need to actually understand, because, like, for example, Tilak and I have never ever touched Dungeons and Dragons. I've played Dungeons and Dragons online, but I don't think it's the same thing. And Raymond, I think, has tried it a bit, like a really small fraction. What is D&D? Like, we see it in movies, we see it in TV shows, but it's always the classic kind of like cliche trope of like, oh, let's laugh at these quote unquote geeks who are playing like a role-playing game and shit, and it's always that kind of like bullshit cliche. But it's so big now, I feel, that we can't just it's not that we can't ignore it, it's that it shouldn't be that, it's almost mainstream now in a way. So what is D&D?
Well, first of all, it is not actually Dungeons and Degenerates.
I think it should be.
It is Dungeons and Dragons, but I can see why you would call it Dungeons and Degenerates
Yes.
for this group in particular.
Yes.
So, what is D&D? I think this is a question that if you ask most DMs out there, they all have a different answer.
Yes.
But for me, I would say that I see it as it is a tabletop role-playing game or TTRPG, but mostly I would say it's interactive storytelling. At least the way I DM, I would say is interactive storytelling.
Sure.
So the idea is I throw my players into what is like a sandbox, like a world, my world.
Okay.
And you basically there will be things for you to do, like quests and stuff, but because it's a sandbox, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Yeah, and you help me to tell the story that I'm trying to tell. Like if we're doing a campaign with, let's say, 10 sessions, 20 sessions, then I have an overall story to tell, and I will tell it from my perspective, but because you are players and characters in the story, you tell it along with me based off your actions and based on what you do and what you say. So it's because of that I also prefer to call D&D interactive storytelling. And
Right.
it's not just like a game, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No. So if that's the case, does that mean that you were saying you have 20 sessions, 10 sessions, whatever that you plan, and let's say we came to you like, all right, Max, we want to have 10 sessions. You would have a plan, right, for the 10 sessions. But then because it's interactive, and I guess in some ways maybe what Tilak would do would be something maybe you never planned for or whatever. Can that be done? And then your plan would deviate from what you had planned originally. So let's say it was like something you never thought possible. And Tilak was like, I want to do this decision, this whatever, this action A. Is that against the rules, or is there a whole thing about like what you can and can't do?
I would say that's more of a DM's personal preference
Sure.
because some DMs don't mind it if the players just go off the rails.
Right.
But
right.
but if the understanding between the players and the DM is that they do kind of have a story to tell, then the players would try to hold themselves back to not do
Sure.
anything too crazy as well.
Right. So
But
if it
that's
was,
not to
yeah.
say that's
Mm.
not to say that you're restricted to like any rules on what you can do. Technically, there are no rules. That's the fun of the game.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought
Yep.
as well. So what you're saying is most players, like if it was in a fantasy setting, wouldn't summon a car.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there is a sense of realism, but all
Right.
that is usually discussed with the players beforehand, so
I
they would
see.
understand.
Well,
Must be
how
more
they
like
wanna-
a mutual respect kind of thing. Like if you know the
That is
DM's
part
trying
of
to
it.
do like a save the kingdom kind of
Yeah.
story, you're not going to be like, okay, let's go to the moon, right?
Yeah, that-
well, well, I have a MMO
Wouldn't
that
put
I
it
can
past
introduce
us.
you to that we're going to the moon in. So you know this whole thing about the interactive storytelling. So you're saying that's kind of your perspective on it. What would you say other DMs kind of do? Is it different? Like you said, it was different. How
Yeah.
would it be different in that sense?
Well, again, it depends
Mm.
on the style of the DM.
Sure,
So for
absolutely.
me, I would rather a more narratively driven
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
game.
yeah,
So, because I mean, if you know me, the kind of games I play are all those
Yes.
kinds of like the long stories and
Yeah,
yeah.
a lot
So
of lore,
I'm
yeah.
a more narratively driven kind of DM. So I would prefer it if it was interactive storytelling, and which means that the relationship that I have with my players is more of the kind of like we are both working towards the same goal. So we're
Yes.
on the same team, so to speak. But then there are other DMs who they have a more antagonistic relationship with their players, which means to say they straight up tell the players stuff like "I am here to kill you."
Oh,
So
sure.
in situations like that, then the players will be like, okay, I know there's a story to tell, but because the DM is here to kill us in like every single combat or every single situation, they tend to deviate from the story because there will be situations like maybe the DM expected them to kill this enemy,
Right.
but then they're like, no, we were gonna die. Let's just run away, and then that kind of like changes the story.
Right, so then it becomes
okay.
it almost becomes you versus the DM in a way.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
okay,
exactly.
okay.
That's just one
So-
other perspective, though.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
absolutely.
of course.
Mm.
So because like obviously it's so fluid and it changes, would you say that you sort of start off every game the same, or would you say you sort of adapt to the players you're obviously playing with?
You can start it the same way. It's just because usually the DM has a plan on how to start the session, and it's
Mhm.
when he starts asking the players what they want to do that things start to kind of deviate. So I'd say usually it would be the same
Right.
Okay.
for each
Okay.
session.
Yeah.
And then when the players decide to do certain things, whether collectively or whether individually, then that's when things start to go a bit crazy.
Right. Okay. Cool.
That's
Okay,
cool.
how-
That's cool.
Well, how long have you done? Well, not. I guess yeah. How long have you done DMing for?
As of this year, I think it will be 7 years now.
Oh,
Yeah.
Did you
I think
start as a
7 years
player,
now.
Max, or did you start as a DM straight away?
Right.
How does it
Um,
really work?
Well, my very first exposure to D&D was some time ago, but that was when I was a player, and I only played. I think it was 3 or 4 sessions before I
Yes.
decided, you know what, I want to try this DMing thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So,
And I
so
think-
yeah.
Early.
Yeah, and I think that was because from a young age, I've always had worlds in my head. I've always had stories in my head and characters in my head.
Yeah.
And I would write stories for them. So I'm like, well, that seems kind of perfect then, because then not
Yeah.
only can I write a story now, I can tell it to other people and have them join in. So
That's pretty cool, actually. So,
That's pretty
so
cool.
you started as a player, and you need 3-4 times. So basically, what you're saying is most of your D&D life, you've been a DM, basically.
yeah. I have.
Wow. Imagine that's 7 years of.
That's
How did
yeah.
you even get into? You got into it, what, 7 years ago? Like, what introduced you? Was it a friend who's like, come join us, or did you like Google it, or like how did you get into D&D?
Okay. Let's see. Well, when I was really young, even before I got exposed to the actual tabletop version of it, I was
Yeah.
playing a video game in the past called Neverwinter Nights. I think most
Of
of you know
course,
it.
yes.
Yeah. And Neverwinter Nights was based off D&D. I think back then was the 3rd edition rule set or 3.5 edition. I can't remember, but it was based off D&D rule set. So when I was young, I had no clue what it was, what it was based off, and I just found it really cool that you could choose like your classes and shit. And then when I came into Army, as you were talking, Matthew actually introduced me to my first ever game of D&D, because he was running a 4 point, I think it was 4th edition back then, or 4.5e, and he was like, "Hey, you want to try?" So we played one game, a single game, not the best game to be fair, but it was pretty interesting on my end because I finally understood where all those rules from Neverwinter Nights came from.
Right.
And then I never got to play again, even though it was always kind of like on the back of my head, till I went to uni. And in uni, I studied in Australia. I went to Australia. So because of that, the Australians, obviously, they are a lot more into D&D than the Singaporeans. And so I was introduced to D&D there. And I had a friend, a Singaporean friend, but he also learned it from the Australians. And he DM'd me for a while. And he was not too bad of a DM, but there was a part of me that told myself, okay, he's not a bad DM, but the stories he tells are kind of flat.
Right.
And I kind of told myself, I think I could do better.
Yeah,
exactly. It's kind of like, I think I can do better. And so I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to try. I'm like, I'm going to try. And the first thing that I tried, I remember, was trying to create one of my favorite fantasy worlds, Azeroth from Warcraft.
Of course.
D&D.
Stop. Just stop. Everyone needs to clap to this because well done, man.
I just tried to do that. I tried to do that.
Yeah.
It was pretty good, and then I was like, okay, now I'm going to try creating my own world. And then that's kind of how it started.
That's awesome. That's actually awesome. I actually, it surprised me that Australia has a big D&D community. I never even knew that. Like,
I never would have guessed that, actually.
Yeah. I feel like D&D is one of those things, though. I'm not sure about you guys, but I feel like it's one of those things that if you don't kind of like look for it, right, you wouldn't know someone plays D&D. But then, like, when you ask around or when you talk to people, suddenly, like, more people than you think play D&D. And it's not even that it's not that it's not niche, it's just not that uncommon anymore for someone to be like, yeah, I jam D&D. I mean, Ray and I know probably like 2-3 people who just jam it every Saturday, Sunday, just like that. And I didn't know that before, until we kind of just talked about it and was like, oh, you play D&D too, kind of thing. So I feel like it's I don't know if it's coming back, because Max will probably, be able to tell us if it's coming back or if it's growing. But I feel like it's so much more common than we think nowadays. What do you think about it, Max?
Well, I do agree that in the recent years, maybe in the last 5 years or so, being a geek is now considered cool. Because in the past it was like, oh, you're a fucking nerd, you're a fucking but nowadays, in the last 5 years, being a gamer, being a person who plays D&D or like tabletop games is it's like the cool thing now.
Right.
And I genuinely think that that's a good thing, of course, and also it just shines a light on a hobby that I think it's not just a game, it's not just a hobby, because I do believe that D&D instills a lot of life skills in the players, whether they realize it or not, especially if they start young. So I would always advocate, like, if you have little kids and they want to play D&D, just let them play D&D. Yeah.
What do you
mean by kind of life skills, though? Like in terms of like imagination or creativity or
problem solving?
Well, those two are the most obvious ones, but yes, exactly, problem solving, and then you have critical thinking, strategic planning, just a lot of things, and like generally, because if you meet in person to play, you also learn social interactions, how to navigate social situations. Yeah, so it's actually a lot of skills, whether you realize it or not.
I think the biggest thing that not really surprised me, I guess, about it is like, going back to the whole thing about how you said geek culture is the new quote unquote cool thing, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it is, but at the same time, right, it's gaming that's cool, it's anime and all that stuff that has come back strong and stuff. But then there's almost like that's still not a stigma, but like D&D is that thing of like the other spectrum, there's like gaming and then there's D&D or the
like
at the
hardcore.
very extreme. Yeah, it's like hardcore gaming. And I've always thought of D&D in my head Not as like I've never, I don't really care what people do, so I've never thought of this. Oh, that's like nerdy shit, or that's geek shit. But to me, it was like, man, if you want to get into D&D, you got to get into it like hardcore. It's like full on or nothing because it's so intense. There's like rule books. There's like character sheets. There's all these kind of things you have to do to get into it. Would you say it's quite difficult to get into D&D versus like, I mean, a game you literally boot it up, right? What do you think about that?
Okay, I'd say that if you just watch people playing and you just look at what they're looking at, like the character sheets, it is obviously a bit hard to get into, and you have no clue what they're doing. And sometimes on the outside, if you just look at a table of people playing D&D, it's like, what the hell are they doing? Because there's like you don't see anything. You don't see. They're just talking. It just looks like they're talking.
Yeah.
But genuinely, if you have someone that teaches you how the character sheet works and you have someone who kind of guides you through it, you will realize that everything falls into place really
It kind of
easily
isn't as
and
hard
really
as we
fast.
think, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But the I guess the first thing that might turn people off is the fact that, well, number one, they don't have someone to teach them that, and number two, it does look intimidating, but honestly, that's kind of like just a trap, if you ask me. Yeah,
That's the thing, though, isn't it? Oh, sorry, no, carry on.
No. I was just gonna say, I think the important thing is that, at least in Singapore, the hard point of entry is finding a DM itself.
That's the one. Yeah, I was actually going to say, like, I've always wanted to dabble, but the thing is, it's not a game that you can just randomly pick up because
exactly.
You need like the Dungeon Master dictates your experience of the game, right? So if you don't have anyone like that, you can't really get into it.
Yep.
And I feel like you also can't have like let's say 5 of us just sat down, like 5 randoms, right? Just sat down and we're like, let's play D&D. It's not something you can just play, right? Like what? You can't just be like, all right, Ray, let's just DM, and he'll be like, what? What the fuck? What? Right? It'll be. It's. I feel like that's the exactly that is that point of entry where it's difficult is finding the dungeon master. But is it even rarer in Singapore to find a DM than it is overseas?
Funny enough, the thing that you just described, the 5 of you getting together and someone just randomly DMs, is actually how a lot of people start DMing these days.
No way! Wow.
Because they're kind of like, okay, we want to play, we have the players, but we don't have a DM, and one of them's just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna try and step up to the plate. And they just try it, and they just like buy the book and they just try and follow the rules and stuff. As for whether or not it's easy to find a DM, I would say yes, it's relatively easy if you know the right places, and because of the resurgence of D&D and all that, I think there's actually a lot more like board game hobby shops in Singapore these days, that if you were to just approach the staff and you ask, okay, I want to play D&D, how do I get into it? They usually, not all of them, but they usually have like an in-house DM that will be like, okay, he's running a session on this day, do you want to like come in and join and stuff like that. But of course, this always has the danger of whether or not the shops regulate their DMs, because there is a saying in D&D, which is that no D&D is better than bad D&D. So
that makes
sense. If you have a bad DM, which will kind of spoil your first experience of the game, or kind of like then you rather just not play. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've brought it up about a few times now about the whole there's shops that they do it, and there's like table people sit around the table and do it. I've seen many forms of D&D, right? I've seen people literally having a board game kind of style where they're like moving their pieces along or whatever. I've seen people where the dungeon master sits behind like a board that shields him off from the players almost for his rolls, and everyone's just looking at their sheets. And I've seen ones where everyone just sits, literally is the table with nothing on it and just talking. What's the difference? What is the difference between them? And also, what's the one you do?
Okay, so the one I do is the one that has the miniatures on the board, the battle maps, and the screen that kind of shields you away from the players.
Yeah.
And that is basically what we see as the actual tabletop aspect of the tabletop RPG. And that is the more traditional way of playing. But of course, in recent years, you have what you described, like they're just sitting there and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And that's more of a what we call theater of the mind. So essentially,
Wow.
as the name suggests, theater of the mind,
Yeah.
it requires your players and the DM to have a really strong, almost, I guess, imagination where they picture everything going on in their head, including
Holy
combat.
shit.
It's pretty
Yeah.
intense, actually.
That'll
That's
be
very
Harder,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's honestly harder to do because,
Absolutely.
especially with new players, because they need usually players. I feel they need a visual guide if they have like a new players. They want to see something.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, there is one last way of doing it, which is online nowadays. You could just do it online, and especially with the pandemic going on, online has
Yeah.
become a lot more popular. Where people just log on, they create like the map in the game, like in the online site or in the program, and then they run it from there.
Oh
Right.
shit, straight away.
Yeah, they
That's
can,
pretty
but of
cool.
course that requires work from the DM to set it all up first.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, of course.
But the theater of the mind would be very difficult in my opinion because like there's a lot of like rules and stuff in regards to like spacing and stuff, right? That'd be
Yeah,
a lot harder to like line of sight or like
yeah. It's not
Yeah.
easy.
It's
Line
like
of
a lot
sight.
of things to think about while trying to also picture the game and the scenario. It's a
Exactly,
lot of
yeah,
things
yeah.
at one hand.
I think
Wow.
more experience, but I think like in the end of the day, that's like a lot less work in regards to like maps and figures and stuff, right?
Yep.
Might be like a good means for like more experienced people.
Things more.
But of course, to me as a DM
Mm.
as well, it there is a sense of wonderment, almost like a childlike wonder, if you use the miniatures and the battle maps, and you pull out, like for example, they are on the map, and then you just, I mean, they know they're gonna fight a dragon, but pulling out the dragon miniature and showing it to them is a different kind of like sense
Right.
of amazement, and they were like, oh
It is
shit,
pretty-
when the
yeah.
dragon just shows up.
Yeah,
That'd be pretty
I
cool.
can see that. I can see that. That would be pretty cool. It's harder because everyone. I mean, like, let's say I say right now, imagine a dragon. Everyone imagines it differently, right?
Right.
But when
right.
you see the
Exactly.
thing, is like, oh my god, and then you see it next to your miniature. Yeah, I get that. I
Yeah,
get
just
that.
like,
It's the same
oh.
wonderment as the video game.
Yeah, and not to
Yeah.
mention, like, because it's the miniature, so the sizes will be different. So like your miniature next to the dragon's one would actually be small, and you'll be like, oh
Yeah.
damn.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. That's
Proper
pretty
wow
cool.
factor.
That does
Yeah.
have the wow factor.
Yeah.
It's a lot better than well, not better, but it's easier, I think, to access in that way than just purely imagination.
Yep.
Unless you were quite, I guess, experienced player.
Mm.
I personally feel it'd be like a better experience overall as well.
Yeah.
That's the one we're doing, right?
I think generally it's pretty good for players to be able, first time players especially, to be able to see all that very elaborate setup, and in the more real, like super elaborate setups where they really go all in, is where they have like mood lighting in the room, they have like a surround sound speaker to play music from, stuff like
Man,
that.
I can
That'd be
imagine.
so
I can
cool.
imagine.
A smoke machine, like
Yeah, almost. Yeah, smoke machine
Yeah,
too.
that
Yeah.
would be so dope.
That would
That'd
actually be
insane.
so
I would
cool.
love
Imagine
that.
experiencing that.
Yeah, that's true augmented reality, my bro.
Yeah. Basically,
I-
and it helps with immersion as well. So I think that really plays a part.
Yeah, I would love immersion, to play immersion D&D with these boys,
The
and
boys,
then
yeah.
like fucking Ray disappears under the table, comes back up as an elf girl. I'll be like, oh yeah, immersion, bro, immersion.
Just get a costume ready to go.
So Max, we introduced you as a professional D&D master, the dungeon master,
Dungeon master, yeah.
or degenerate master, in other words. You
With
have-
you guys.
yeah, with us, with us.
Yeah.
So how did you even become one? Like, is the community that big now that they're paying people to be DMs, or how did you get into it?
Well, I don't know how many professional and paid DMs there actually are in Singapore. But from what I do know, there are some DMs who feel like if they do a good enough job, they can actually charge players, and there are DMs who are they don't actually run games with friends, and instead they just get paid to run games for essentially
Wow.
strangers, and it becomes more of like a client more than a
Yeah,
client paying
Mhm.
customer. Yeah, because for me, I usually just run games with people that I know. I
Right.
prefer that, at least. Yeah,
Yeah.
but then there are people who just do that for strangers. And how I became a professional dungeon master was actually because it kind of happened by coincidence, really. I was buying some miniatures of a shop, an online shop, on like those shopping apps, and he happened to just start talking to me about just D&D in general. And so he asked me a lot of questions. He asked me like, how do I DM, what do I
Right.
do, and stuff like that. And I think he realized one thing about my kind of DMing that impressed him was that I created my own world. And I played my
Right.
own world, which in D&D we call a homebrew world.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's a homebrew world with some homebrew rules, and the story is homebrew as well. So basically everything is by me and me alone. Whereas he was more of a DM that did like published adventures. So he would just read the
Right.
books, and then the books would be the guide, and like you could still create your own stuff, but it's not nearly to the extent that I do it.
Absolutely.
And so we happened to just start talking, and then I think a few months later he told me that his business was actually growing from the shopping app, and he was actually going to
Nice.
open like a physical shop.
Nice.
And he was going to
Yeah.
make that shop. He was going to make that shop the one-stop, kind of like a one-stop shop in Singapore for D&D.
Singapore.
So like,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
So like when you think about D&D in Singapore, eventually you get to a point where you're like, oh, I know this shop, because a lot of shops in Singapore that sell D&D stuff are just mixed. Like they sell
They're
D&D
like
stuff,
hobby
but they also
shops,
sell
right? Yeah.
they sell D&D stuff, but then they also sell like trading card games. They sell
Yeah,
board
yeah,
games. They
yeah.
sell like the
Yeah.
Warhammer miniatures, and none of them are like really specialized. And
Right.
so this guy was like, I want to make a shop that is just only highly specialized, and like people can approach us to ask
That is
to
awesome.
join newbie games. And
Yeah.
so he's like, you know what? When the shop finally opened, he told me, you know what? When you are free of your corporate job, because before that I was in a corporate job. He's
Yeah.
like, when you quit that corporate job, let me know, and then I'll hire you on the spot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's so cool. Like that's insane. Like you
So
basically, yeah. Sorry, you go, T.
no. So it's genuinely like your full-time job. Like this is what you do 24, not 24/7, but you're 9 to 5.
It's a part-time job, but
Yeah.
it's a part-time job because I'm also studying. But if I wasn't studying, then yes, it would be my full-time job.
That's cool.
So
Dang, how did you break those that news to your parents?
I just told them really, and they were surprised because they didn't. I think they just didn't expect
yeah.
that it could
Mm.
even be a job. I
Yeah.
suppose.
As
Yeah.
usual.
Yeah, and Asian parents being Asian parents, they first of all they never quite understood how the game worked. And
Right.
so when I told them that I was being hired to do it, I think that's when they realized, oh, number one, you can be paid for it, and number two, you have to be of a certain standard for
Yeah.
someone to want to hire you. Yeah.
Fair,
And they were like, oh,
right.
he's actually. The funny thing is, right? Like, it. Going back to that whole Asian parents thing or whatever, right? It's that whole thing of, oh, it's just a hobby, and then when they realize that you can make money from it, suddenly it's like,
Yeah.
go for it,
Go
pursue
for it.
your dreams, bro. You know, and like
Kind of.
they're like, no, don't do that, don't do that.
Kind of.
It's
Because to be
insane.
fair, it's not like streaming. Because streaming, you start from literally the ground up, right? You don't know whether you're gonna hit it off. But in this case, you already knew you were.
Mm.
It was like a part-time gig for you, so I see why they were
Yeah.
more comfortable.
Well, I
with
think
it,
he
guess.
like turned basically what it turned a hobby into a paying job, right? Which is awesome. That's the dream, really.
the dream, yeah.
Yeah, that's the dream. So yeah, it's pretty cool actually. Is it how do I say this? Is it busy though? Like, do you always have clients and stuff? And you said you like to run it for friends, right? But now that you're working for the shop, does that mean randoms come in and you just run it for them, or how does it work?
There is a certain level of needing to run for people that you don't know,
Mm.
but there, at the same time, because this is a shop after all, and they do keep track of the players that have joined their games before.
Sure.
So there is a certain level of I guess I don't know if transparency is the right word, but then you kind of do know who you're
Yeah.
DMing for. You
Yeah.
you kind of know what these players are like, or at least an inkling of what they're like. So it's kind of, it's not the same as running for friends, obviously, but eventually you do get to a point where you're comfortable with them, so it kind of feels like it is running
You're
for
running
friends.
Right.
Yeah,
very
the
cool.
difference is for me, if I run my own personal game in my own personal world for my friends, like my regular group, I am all into it, and I will think even out of the session. I'll be like, okay, so like this character's character arc is coming up. What do we do?
Oh wow.
What do we plan for? So in that regard, like I still think about it out of the game. But
Yeah.
when it's a paying gig, the paying gig is the kind of thing where like, okay, I show up, I give you an excellent game, but after the game's over, I just stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it's-
because
and then we just-
yeah.
Kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we only come back to it when like the next session comes in, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's not so much of a constant adding on to the world and adding on to the session kind of thing. that I do with
Right,
like my
right.
actual personal
Wow.
game.
Okay.
So
That's
It makes
cool.
sense though.
yeah,
Yeah.
it does. I think it's one thing is, you know, with your friends, obviously you're kind of like growing with them, and also it's more like a
You're more invested.
you're constantly going with them. You're growing with them in that story. Whereas if it's thing, it's like, well, you're not in a way to be a dick, but like it's like, well, you're not paying me right now. Why would I think about it? You know what I mean? It's like, it's not. You were paying me. I would do it. Otherwise, kind of thing. It's not like it doesn't take anything away from the sessions you do, but it's also like, why would you? I guess in a quote unquote work outside of work hours, right? So I guess yeah, that does make sense.
I think there's
yeah.
another layer to it, which is that at least with the shop, the professional DM that I'm doing,
Yep.
he wants me to run just published adventures. So it's just again like what he does, just kind of in a way, kind of like
Oh.
reading off a book. So the difference is when I do the paid ones with the customers, it's the kind of thing where okay, I already have the setting, I already have the world, I already have the adventure all written out for me. I just need to
Right.
reference that, and then I just do it.
Kinda,
I just
yeah.
put on the show for them, and then I leave. That's it. But with my personal game, because it's my own world, me adding on to the world actually benefits me as well because it's my own creation. It's
Yeah.
like my baby almost. So
Yeah.
like, why not? Why wouldn't you do that?
Well,
True,
we
It's
just
my
do it,
own.
like, really well.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
interesting. That's interesting.
Was it? Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Was it your decision to follow the book when you got hired, or was it just part of the job description essentially?
Well, I think he figured, and I do agree with him, that if you run published adventures, it's number one, it's easier to sell because people know what the adventure is,
Right.
and number two, it's easier time for the DMs in general if they have to run like 4 different games with like 4 different groups of players. It's easier to keep track of what's going on if you know what written adventure you're running. Yeah, which I agree with.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's
That makes sense from that perspective.
Do
you think that-
Sorry, yeah.
Do you think
there
that
you go, Ray.
because you were talking about how growing and stuff like with everything that's going on, like and people that turn up at those shops, I think D&D would be like an awesome place to like make like long-term friends and stuff, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And not to mention the shop that he's trying to set up. He's also trying to make it more like a community where, like, if you want to come hang, you can just come hang, and we just talk D&D like the whole day, kind of thing.
That's pretty cool. There's
pretty
like the whole
Yeah.
idea of that kind of shop because then you get like dedicated people that will always come back and like go to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
shop,
He
right?
already has some. That's the thing. He
Yeah.
already has like regular loyal customers that just come back. But that's also because he makes sure that the 4 DMs that he hired, one of them being myself and him, so there are
Yeah.
2 other DMs. He made sure that 4 core DM group is a quality one, so people
Yeah.
would want to come back. They would be like, "Oh, the DMs are great. I do want to come back and play."
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Which is like a huge, amazing kind of like, I think it's a real cool idea for like a sort of like a shop sort of thing. So hopefully everything goes well.
I think it's really cool when people create, I guess in a word, businesses, right? But are more focused on like bringing the community together, and in this case, it's the D&D one, right? And they're more focused about the welfare in a way of the community, and it's really cool that it's not just like, I mean, obviously money plays a part, right? But it's not really just about that. It's about like making that kind of a place where almost like a D&D guild in the world. You know, you see those like shows, anime or whatever, where there's like the guild where everyone can go hang and have a good time.
Yeah,
This literally
adventurous
sounds like
guild.
what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly there, right? And it sounds really cool because I don't think we have anything like that in NZ. I wouldn't know, but I don't think we do.
That's actually so funny enough that you just said that. But Ray, on AVMore Drive, so there's a place in East Auckland. There's like a China Square. There's like a fruit world and like dope restaurants. And I went once with my mum for this chicken rice and stuff. And then there was an upstairs, and I went upstairs, and it was like a comic book store, but twice
Spellbound, right?
weekly. Yeah, twice weekly. They either run Magic the Gathering or Dungeons and Dragon. And I think one of the days I stumbled in just because I was just looking around, and it was a D&D day, and like everyone was together. Like there were like 6 different games going on. It was actually really sick, though. I can imagine like that's what he sort of
Like
pictures
they
the
must.
store to be.
It's like you find people who are like interested in the same kind of like hobbies and are just as committed, I guess, as you are. I think it's really cool. It's a really cool.
It was really
type of
low
thing,
key.
yeah.
It was super low key as well. Like, it wasn't like big obvious signage outside. There was like D&D games in here, so it's like word of mouth that gets like the real proper players in as well.
I mean, I guess I think Max will probably be able to speak on this more, but I guess most D&D players would have a group that they play with to begin with, right? I mean, maybe the new ones wouldn't, but in general, if you were looking to go to a place to play, I don't think you would be like a new player. Surely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in general, well, there are certain people
Mm.
who genuinely are new players and they don't have a group, and so they go to shops like that to
Sure.
look for a group.
Yeah.
But usually it's the case where you have a group of friends who want to play, and so they already kind of have a group. They just either need a DM or they already have a DM, and they just stick to the same group. Yeah,
They just kind of
most of the time that's kind of how it works. Yeah.
It's yeah, okay. So after I mean D&D has been around for what? It's been around forever, right? So it's a very old game.
It's a really old game.
In terms of like it's a game, right? It's a role-playing game. In terms of that it's not a video game, obviously, but what do you think is the role-playing game? I don't think there's any others that I know of that I can say, yeah, there's D&D and there's also whatever, like A or B. Why is it that D&D is basically the champion and the number one role-playing game that isn't like not in terms of video game RPGs, like true RPG? There's only D&D. Is it because it's the oldest, or is it because it's the most established, or is it just the best?
I think it's part of it has to do with the fact that it's the oldest, because you
Yeah.
have other game systems which are essentially the same thing, but they
Yeah.
all spawn from D&D, and I think the biggest one of that is Pathfinder. So Pathfinder is another game system which spawned from the 3rd edition rules of D&D, and so even that one is like D&D came first. So I think one of the reasons why it's known as like the grandfather of all the games is also because it's that old. But I think primarily the reason why it's so big and so like famous almost, and like the pioneer, is also because of 2 reasons, if you ask me. And the first reason is the fact that I think it's probably the first game of its kind that was really like you can do whatever you want, and it also embodied like the high fantasy aspect of like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. And you are basically brought into like a high fantasy world with like magic and stuff, and like you also, I think the concept of having actual choice in the game, like you can do whatever you want, and then like rolling dice and all that was just a really new idea back then. Don't quote me on that because I don't know like the real full history of D&D, but at least that's what I think is.
I mean, it's literally older than us, isn't it? Like
but I think that's the draw of the game. But back then the rules were of course a bit convoluted and a bit messy. So back then it was really like the basement dwellers who played it, put it that way. But right now the newest edition of the game, the 5th edition of the game, is so navigable and so the ability to change it to whatever you want, like you can bend the rules and just change the rules. It's really easy to get into, which is it's so accessible. So I think that's the reason why you also see a resurgence right now.
Right.
That would make sense.
So is that easier than ever to get into?
Even more so, and not only is it easy to get into, it's also easy to DM, to be honest, and that's also probably why we are also starting to see a slower growth of DMs, but there is definitely an increase.
So, I don't know if I'm wrong about this. D&D is by Wizards of the Coast, is that right?
Yeah,
it is, right? And
currently, yes.
Okay.
Not initially, but currently it's owned by them, yes.
What I've heard, and actually it does strike me as kind of, it makes sense, right? Is that everyone here, we play video games, right? We love video games. All of us are video gamers. And no matter what kind of gamer you are, you must have touched an RPG at some point. What I've heard is that every RPG out there in terms of video games it's still based on the same rules of D&D in terms of the like whether you're going to hit your crit, whether you're going to dodge this. There's an inbuilt dice rolling in the background, even though it's an algorithm. But the core of every RPG is D&D, basically, if you think about it. And I found it really fascinating because I can't remember who told me, and I was describing like an RPG, whatever game it was, right? And he comes to me and he says, "Oh, so basically Wizards of the Coast rules." And I was like, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's D&D. It's basically D&D rules, or rather, it's D&D's concept put into an RPG in terms of your dice rolling, in terms of whether you're going to hit that crit, in terms of whether you're going to dodge it, or whether you can do this, whether you can do that, blah blah blah." Obviously, the true D&D, you have more pathways to go down, but I think it's really cool that D&D is still really not just that it's the best RPG out there, it's also in every RPG out there. Is that true, Max? Do you think it's like I'm not sure if that's a thing that is backed by facts or it's actually still true to
It's
these days.
it's pretty much true in the sense of a lot of it is inspired by D&D, because
Yeah.
especially with RPGs where you have like the classes where you can choose
Yeah.
classes, for example, like Dragon Age. Most of them, they have inspiration from D&D, because D&D gives you the ability to choose classes as well, and like you can be a sword wielding warrior, you can be a rogue, you can be a mage, and then there are rules in the background regarding, like you said, the algorithm rolls the dice
Yeah.
and kind of like that. And
Yeah.
the core concept of it does come from D&D, because the idea is you choose a class, and if you want to do something, you make a roll. And of course, there are situations where like your choice actually matters in those RPGs, which again also comes from D&D. So a lot of it is definitely inspired by D&D, and I think it's evolved a lot because of technology,
Yeah.
but the core idea remains the same. The
It's
core
it
concept
has to
remains the
be,
same.
right? That's really cool.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you talk to any of us who's played any kind of RPG or MMO, anything like that, and
Yeah.
and we, let's say Raymond, I asked you, what
Yeah.
are there's four almost like cardinal, right, classes of any RPG,
Yeah.
and I never
same.
thought about it until Max literally mentioned it by then. But D&D must have been the granddaddy of that. They created the four. I mean, it goes warrior,
Yeah, it
rogue,
is the granddaddy.
yeah, right. It goes
The
warrior,
warrior,
rogue,
rogue,
mage, and healer. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Healer,
It's
yeah.
always
Yep.
those four. In any RPG, it spawns from those four and it branches out, right? And
Mm.
now that I'm thinking of it, like obviously it comes from D&D, but it's insane because how many people really know that? People know of D&D, and they like some people, even gamers, right? And I mean video gamers would be like, haha, D&D, it's that like nerd shit or whatever, right? People probably still make fun of it, not knowing that D&D is basically probably responsible for all the rules of every RPG we play these days. Or
The
not
core
even just
concepts,
rules.
yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah, the
the
core
core concepts, the characters, the classes, even probably the races, bro.
It must be
Right.
like
The races to an extent, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
it must be like it may not be the very first that invented it, but I'm sure like Dungeons and Dragons, from what I can tell, is definitely the one that expanded it on the most,
Expanded
right?
it.
Yeah,
Yep,
like,
yep.
refined
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. I think it's just insane to think that something has such a far reach from like
And I
literally
think,
older than us, right? It's
yeah,
insane.
and I think stuff like, how in RPGs you can equip gear and all that.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that also stems from D&D, because D&D you get gear, you get stronger and stuff like that.
Jeez.
And there's also a reason, now since we're on the topic on the games, there's
Yeah.
also a reason why, again, I could be wrong with this, but I think this is what it means. There
Mm.
is two categories of RPGs, where you have RPGs and then you have CRPGs. And CRPGs, classic RPGs, are like they literally play more like D&D, where it's a turn-based kind of system. So you
Yeah.
have like Pillars of Eternity, you have right now you have the Pathfinder games as well, which is based off Pathfinder, but that's also based off D&D. So
Yeah.
the CRPGs are the old classic actual turn-based one, where I guess nowadays the more modern RPG like Witcher 3 is not turn-based, it's more like live,
action
kind
in
of
a
like
way.
action.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it still has its roots in D&D.
Mm.
So yeah.
I think that's really cool. I think that's
Yeah.
really, really cool. Like it's very impressive that a game created so long ago has such a far reach, has such a big influence that
Yeah.
I mean, if you know anything about gaming, you have to see the parallels between the two. You have to see it. It's almost in your face once you look into D&D. You're like, what the hell? This is like
For sure. For sure.
this is things that I've already done in video games, but this was created like before video games were even like on the radar, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. Going back into the whole DMing side of things, do you have like a favorite memory that you can recall about being a DM that you will always be like, yeah, that's absolutely the thing that made me love, I guess, being a DM?
Well, there's a couple, I think.
Mm.
There's not really one, but usually moments where I kind of live for DMing is when I'm able to see the reactions of my players when we play the game, and like I drop a bomb, like a plot bomb,
Yeah,
or I drop something really major, and you can see the reactions of the
Yeah.
players actually freaking out. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
moments like that. And then you also have on the opposite spectrum, you also have moments where your players surprise you, and your players do something that you didn't expect, and they like either they clinch victory, or they kind of solve a puzzle in the most unexpected way. That is also the kind of thing where you're like, man, that's pretty cool. Didn't expect that, but it's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's
Do you think that? How often do you think that really happens when a player surprises you? Because obviously you host all these games, you see everything. How often do you reckon it really impresses you?
Well, it doesn't happen that often, but I think that's also what makes it special. Because when it happens, then you're like, oh, we really got something here.
Yeah.
And I can't really put like a frequency, but when it does happen, it's definitely magical.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing that is always a really good memory is also when something emotional happens. And I think
Yeah.
that those are the moments that a lot more people don't expect, especially because again, pulling it back to when we previously discussed about like games and RPGs being influenced by D&D, games like that have moments where things are emotional as well. But that's because in those sort of games you have like the music, you have like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
voice
the voice
acting.
acting, absolutely.
Yeah, but so imagine if you can do that in D&D but in person with like 5 people on the table or 6 people on the table and all of you are emotional about a certain thing. It can actually bring like actual tears and stuff. And
Yeah,
I think that
I bet, to be
moment
honest, yeah.
moments like that is really when you're like, oh man, this is
You
this
got a,
this
you
is
got a
this
really
is
good
not
game
just
going.
this is not just a game, man. It's like it's something else.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
good
yeah,
shit.
no, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's the same as a video game, right? Like when there's a video game that affects you to that level, you're like, oh my god, this is a great game. So I don't see why, firstly, that D&D couldn't do that, which it obviously could. But also, when it does do that, you must really be like, oh yeah, that's it. This is it. This is like the reason why I play, or this is the reason why it's so
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
Do you ever play as a character, Max, or just a DM?
Well, technically, if you're a DM, you play many characters. But I know what you mean.
Yeah, yeah.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But well, I occasionally do get the chance to play, but frankly speaking, and I've said this to almost everyone who asked me that question, I definitely prefer to DM.
Sure.
But that's just
Oh,
me.
okay.
It's actually quite rare apparently because a lot more people who DM they do want to be players from time to time, or they would rather be
Yeah.
players.
Yeah.
But I am, I guess, one of those oddballs who's like, no, actually, I like DMing. I want to DM. And my players who play with me for a really long time, they like to joke that it's because I have some sort of god complex, and they're like, you like to be in control. You like to be in control. You wanna, yeah. You wanna make sure that you know everything goes your way. So it's kind of like a power / god complex. So they're like, that's why you want to be a DM, which I don't disagree, I suppose. But it is. But to be fair, it is a healthy outlet to channel your god complex in, rather than
True.
Oh,
like
it is absolutely
somewhere
rather than
else.
like
Like
murdering
it's
in
an
village.
yeah, it's an environment where the
Absolutely.
people who are playing with you allow you to basically lord over them. So it's kind of healthy. So
Do you
yeah,
think
sure.
though that playing as a player rather than a character, right, versus playing as a DM, it gives you kind of insights on each other? Like, so let's say you wouldn't have thought about it until you played as a player, and you're like, oh wait, actually, I would have done this as a player. Therefore, next time when I DM, maybe I'll do this or something. Does that affect each other? Because obviously your players affect you, but if you played as a player, do you think that would affect your practice in the future?
Yeah, actually, I do like knowing things from a player's perspective sometimes
Sure.
because there are moments where, as a DM, you plan a certain maybe a reveal or like information that they have to find, and
Yeah.
like it doesn't occur to you that because as the DM you know everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't occur to you that you might have forgotten to drop certain hints for your players, and that's why they can't solve the puzzle. And you're like, oh right,
Right.
and sometimes you have to kind of like look at it from the player's perspective when you design like sessions or when you design puzzles. You might want to take a step back and try and look at it from a player's perspective and be like, can they solve
absolutely.
that kind of thing?
Yeah.
So it is sometimes it's important to have that other angle. It's
It's
true.
like it's like a situation where like when you're like spectating someone, you know the answer. You're just like, why can't they figure it out? But it's because you know the answer. It just makes
Because you know the answer.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
I actually thought that most DMs would have been wouldn't have liked to be players purely because like you'd be so critical of what the DM that you're playing with, all the decisions you're making, you'd just be in your head the whole time being like, oh, I could do this way better. Like, where the fuck am I spending time here?
Yeah.
I mean, there are DMs that are not. I don't like to call them bad DMs because, in my opinion, I don't think there's really a thing called a bad DM. It's probably just like a DM that needs more training and understanding of the game and getting used to DMing in general.
Of course,
So it's
yeah.
more of like I think it's more inexperienced DMs and not so much of bad DMs.
right.
But yeah, so there are certain situations where some players would just be like, yeah, like I could do better, which is kind of like how I started in a way. So yeah.
It sounds so intense though. Not in terms of the game, but in terms of what you do, Max. You're talking a lot. You said this a couple of times now about the puzzles and stuff, and you also said that you create your own world. In other words, you create your own puzzles and stuff. Is that I mean, you're creating puzzles that could trick, a whole group of gamers basically who are very used to solving puzzles. How do you do that? Like, is that difficult?
There are resources.
Right, I see.
There are resources online.
Right.
I'm tempted to kind of say that it's a DM secret, but now let's just
Okay,
put it all out in the open.
Yeah.
There are guides and resources online on how to create puzzles, but of course, the easiest way to create puzzles, I feel, is just stealing. Straight up, just steal. Like if you have a
Right.
puzzle, if you encounter a puzzle in a game and you're like, oh man, that puzzle was pretty cool, but also
Yeah.
not too hard to solve, you
Yeah.
could just
Right.
copy it, man. Just rip it
And
right
then
off and
just
put
rip
it in
it
your
right
game.
off. Sure,
Yeah, like
sure,
why not?
sure.
But of course, if you take it from like a computer game, then you have to be like, okay, I need to figure out how to translate that into D&D rules.
Yeah.
That's the
just-
only
yeah.
aspect of it that you need to do. But other than that, it's actually you could just copy. But also, while the players might be used to solving puzzles, some players might be playing like dumb characters, and the dumb
Oh,
characters
right.
will not know how to solve it
Oh, yes, of
because
course.
it's
The
two different.
RP, the RP,
Yes,
yes, the RP
yes,
side
it's
of
two
it.
different
Sure.
aspects. So the player might know the answer, but if your character's too dumb, then they will be like, "Oh no, I don't know, man. I have
Oh
no
my
idea."
god, that's
my
so
God, I actually
crazy.
forgot about
Yeah,
that
I did.
aspect.
Yeah.
I would not have thought about that. Wow.
Yeah.
So even if you knew the answer, but your character was dumb, you technically in the game you couldn't say
Oh
you
my
don't know
God.
you're dumb.
Yeah. Conversely,
Oh.
on the other hand, you can have a player who doesn't actually know the answer, but their character is a really smart character. So they could just straight up be like, okay, because my character's so smart, can I make some sort of role and maybe like you as the DM give me some hints, which actually works as well. So in terms of that, it kind
Oh.
of pushes the player towards solving the puzzle.
So it works both ways. Like even
It
if you
works
knew
both ways, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what? And then obviously the worst is if you're real dumb in real life and your character's real dumb, and then you just know how.
You are actually
Ah.
clueless. You're like, I don't know what's
that
going
was
on.
perfect for Tilling.
Like, I actually don't know what's going on.
But okay, so is that why when it's probably no secret we're gonna actually be playing the game in a couple of weeks, right? Is that why when we were kind of like delving into the character creation, you're like make it as close to you as possible because it would be so frustrating
Role
to
playing,
play
isn't
a
it?
character
Yeah.
who's like opposite you. You know the answer,
It's-
you can't say it. I could not think of something more annoying than that. Like generally,
It's easier to roleplay a character that is a little bit like an exaggerated version of yourself or like a toned down version of yourself, depending, because then you can easily get into their head. Because
sure.
especially for new players, it might be a little bit difficult to get into the RP of it. Like, how do you roleplay?
Yeah, that's to be
Absolutely.
honest,
Yeah.
that's the thing I'm worried about the most. Like,
Yeah.
how do
So
I
if
roleplay?
you have a character that is basically kind of like you, but in
Then
a
just
more
be yourself.
exaggerated fantasy version, then you could just be like, okay, how would I react in that situation, and it would
Yeah.
still be true to character. Which is why I always suggest to new players don't go too insane. At least
Yeah.
with the personality. If it's really your first few times RPing, just do a character that's more similar to you. It's easier that way.
See, you say that, Max, and right. So I've told Ray. I don't think Tilix heard this, but I did the affinity quiz, right? So I was like, okay, what's my D&D affinity? Because I need to know, right? Because I want to RP as close to me as possible. And literally, I remember what you telling me, like, don't go too crazy. It's really hard to go like on either end, right? You're going like lawful good is as difficult as playing, chaotic evil. And so I was like, I hope I get something close to neutral. Bang, I get straight up affinity chaotic evil, and I'm like,
Classic.
Exactly. And people are like, yeah, that's you, man. And I'm like, what?
Antagonist guys.
Antagonist.
No, I mean, okay. To be fair, even if in the game you or like the affinity you get chaotic evil, you can kind of just push it a little bit for easier roleplay into the more neutral scale. Like you get,
right?
like you can push yourself to a bit more like a neutral evil kind of scale and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there are certain. Speaking of the alignment chart, though, there are certain DMs who don't quite allow evil characters because again, an evil character in the hands of an inexperienced player, they can actually screw up the game. They can like break the story flow and stuff like that. So some players, some DMs will be a little bit more strict about that, and they're like, unless I know that you are experienced, I won't allow it.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. That's absolutely fair because, well, to be honest, I don't even know where to start with that. Like, there's one thing saying be yourself and stuff, right? But if you're truly trying to be like an evil character without being a dick and breaking the game for everyone else, I find that almost well in my head it's almost impossible. Obviously, with experience, you're probably able to do it. But in my head right now, I'm like, what do I do? Kind of thing.
and there's a big difference between like evil characters and like what we like to call so like chaotic evil characters. There's a
Sure.
difference between chaotic evil characters and chaotic stupid characters.
Yeah.
Chaotic stupid is not an official alignment, but there are many players who think that just because I'm evil, I can just do dumb things and just be an asshole. Well, no,
just to be an
there's a
asshole.
difference.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference. Yeah.
So,
So like
how...
it's a clear distinction essentially.
Yeah, so with that, like for example, if let's say you were, I think Ray, what you wrote as neutral good, right, or something like that. So
Yeah,
if Ray was
middle.
if Ray was neutral good, would it mean that in the game he could never ever do anything that was considered evil? And on the flip side, the opposite is also true, right? So you can still do that.
You can still
but
do
it's just that if in the game there will be similar to real life and similar to video games, you have like your actions have consequences. So if you do something bad and you are or something evil, like killing someone, and because murder is evil. So like if you murdered someone and your character is actually good, then the DM might be like, okay, if you keep doing stuff like that, then your alignment as the character will change.
Oh yeah.
Then you would have to
okay.
Then you would have to be like, okay, if my alignment changes, that means that a lot of the role play that I do from now on would have to change as well.
Right.
And your DM
your
DM would like warn you that it's gonna happen. Then you would be like, okay. Then you could decide as a player, do you want to continue down this line? Do you want the alignment change? Or do you like, okay, I should probably and you could be like, okay, maybe I should step back and watch myself from now on and like start to do more good rather than evil, that kind of thing. But of course, this also is related to the point that I talked about my DMing style, which is more narratively driven. If you feel like maybe your character has gone through a traumatic moment and they do actually want the alignment change, then go for it, man.
Yeah.
Because if it makes for a good story and if it makes sense,
oh my god, this is so cool. I'm so excited about this. This is so cool. Yeah, it's like that awakening phase when an asshole
kind of.
Oh my god, this is so cool. Like what you just described is like why I play like most of the story-driven games.
Exactly.
Like, where you're like boom, and then it's like,
except this time you're actually doing it like as the character. You are actually role playing as a character. It's your choice.
The appeal is massive right now. I can fully. I mean, like obviously we're gonna do it, but like I completely understand it now. It's insane.
Okay,
that's crazy.
The more unfortunate thing, I suppose, is if you just do a single session, it is still gonna be fun. But all this character development and all this character growth will not happen in just one session. You will have to do like long campaigns for that to happen. But hey, that's the appeal of the long campaigns. That's the reason why there are players who are still playing the same D&D campaign for like 10 years and they haven't stopped.
Jesus.
All right, guys. Guess we're making a D&D podcast after this.
The
secondary podcast where we just play D&D with Matt.
Attach a monthly special or something to our podcast.
How long does
a bad idea right now? Not gonna.
How long does a normal session normally last for, Max?
Well, it's honestly up to the DM, but I think it averages about 3 to 4 hours. There are certain times that I think that's a good time personally, because most people they start to lose a little bit of their attention, or they start to lose their energy after that amount of time. But there are certain moments where maybe if you know that it's a really big session, or if you know that it's a session like maybe you guys have been playing in like 2 months and then you meet again, then you could push it. If you as a DM feel comfortable, like your stamina, and you feel like you can push it for like 6-7 hours, like why not? It's up to you. But I think the average session is about 3 to 4.
Okay.
It blows my mind that the more we talk about this, the more I realize that the games that you ever play is all actually just based off D&D. Like
it is.
It's all like
It is.
The more we talk about it, I'm just like, it's literally like the granddaddy where everything's made from it. It's crazy.
It's not even just games. There are also like, especially with alignments, there are also even like popular characters are based off the alignments out as well. And you can actually see them. You could be like, like for example, the Joker. Well, the Joker's not really the best example, because the Joker, some people say he's chaotic evil, some people say he's lawful evil. So it's okay. Darth Vader. Darth Vader is lawful.
Darth Vader is lawful evil, surely. Right?
Darth Vader is lawful evil. So stuff like that.
What about like
in pop culture,
stuff, right?
Loki's neutral evil, I would say. Chaotic neutral, maybe. But
I actually don't know if you guys. I don't know if you guys know. I swear from my childhood, there's a Dungeons and Dragons movie, and I don't know if have you watched that?
That was a really long time ago, I think, and it was really bad. But a long time ago.
That was like the first real experience I got with Dungeons and Dragons. I was like, yo, shit, this is
experience possible
sick.
as well.
I was like an 8-year-old
think-
watching this fucking dog shit movie, being like, wow, this is a
most
sick
people
movie.
being exposed to it right now will be like the live stream games and all that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
absolutely. So, Max, in terms of the D&D community, right? Is it a big community now? I know you said it's growing, but would you say it's, I don't know, a big community in the sense that you have constant people coming in, new players coming in all the time, and we know there's a lot of big names coming in right now. For example, the Critical Role podcast that they play it live and stuff. Do you think that influences more people joining, and is it ever growing, or is it kind of that thing that like, okay, you have a spike because there's an interest and then it dies out, and then you have a spike and then it dies out?
Fun fact, I think most new players that I've played with that I personally DM'd or were DM'd by other pretty good DMs that I know, none of them have left the hobby. Literally none of them have left the hobby.
Wow.
So
Oh.
I feel like it's the kind of thing where if you go in and you realize this is actually your cup of tea, you're never leaving, man. You're
That's
just
really
going in
cool.
whole.
Right.
I
Yeah,
can
but-
see that though, to be honest. Yes.
Yeah, but I would say that with the emergence of like Critical Role, Dimensions 20, Dice Camera Action, all the live streamed D&D games, it definitely shines a new light on how special the game is. It shines a light on
Yeah.
how good the game can be as well. And so I think a lot of people would definitely be interested. And also not to mention, like the people in those games, if they are celebrities, it definitely helps them to also bring their interest to the game. And I think, for example, Critical Role, the reason why people loved it so much is also because they realized that the cast was in so much of their favorite games, and they're like, "Oh, damn!"
Yeah.
And then they fell in love with it as well. So I think that definitely helps, for sure.
It definitely like when I watched it, I was like, oh, the full like Dungeons and Dragons was like, okay, there's like a story. But like when you watch those videos of those streams and that sort of stuff, you kind of see like to what extent that story can really become into. Like you can come like how invested people can get into it and how vibrant and like beautiful the worlds they can create is. And that's
Absolutely.
like people want a piece of that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think I can understand though that whole I don't want to say addiction, but that whole like draw to it, right? It's a game that cannot be replicated. Like, how do you find any game out there that it's literally like, oh, you can do anything. You can literally do anything.
Yeah,
right?
so
How do you
open-ended,
find
right?
that? It's so open-ended.
That's actually how I sell the game to new players who've been playing too many video games. Because I tell them stuff like, in a video game, even if you wanted to do certain things, you're constrained by whatever options the video game provides for you. Like even in conversation or even in combat, you are stuck to whatever the game lets you do. But imagine if, like, I think many of us, especially, and I actually do tell this to new players, like I said, I think a lot of us, especially people who like playing RPGs, there are moments if you are actually RPing your character in an RPG video game and the conversation options come up and you're like, I hate all of these options. There's something else that I wanted to say, but I can't. And I'm like, well, in this game, you can.
You can
Say what
yes.
you want to say. Like, there is no way you'll be like, oh, I can't do that. No, you can do that. Yeah,
That's
and I think
so
that's
cool.
I think that's the pull for a lot of people, especially people who really get invested in the characters that they create. Because then they're like, oh man, I can actually do all these things. And they have all these grand ideas of where they want their character to go, how their character would act. Like they write a story, the entire story of the character in their head, stuff like that. Yeah.
I need to talk about something. You mentioned that, okay, first I need to confess something. I don't do as much research as it would seem for this. Probably doesn't seem
That's
that I do
okay.
much research. Okay,
That's
so
okay.
we talked about Critical Role, and you said, oh, a lot of the people we love are in this. So I was like, wait, what? And I Googled it. Laura Bailey's in it?
Yes, Laura Bailey's in.
What?
Matt Mercer. Laura Bailey, Matt Mercer, Travis Billingham, Liam O'Brien,
Laura Bailey's a
Johnson.
god.
Very
She's Jaina Proudmoore too. Like
She's Jaina Proudmoore. No, she's not just Jaina. She's a lot of characters.
Yeah,
she's
a
a lot of characters.
She's the voice actress for Jaina Proudmoore in
Jaina Proudmoore,
in WoW, basically.
Holy shit!
Oh,
That's such a big dick.
I'm low-key screaming right now, but I don't want to. Oh my
amazing.
god, she's amazing. I mean, like the minute I saw her, I was like, oh my god, it's Jaina, obviously. But
She's
in
amazing.
everything.
She's in
I
everything,
literally
basically.
My god, I'm having a fanboy moment right now, man. No
Yeah,
lie.
sounds like.
No lie. I just full on screamed.
He's gonna start watching the videos. I think they're like 100
She's
to 200.
Serana from
She's Serana. Yes,
Dragonborn.
she's Serana. Exactly.
Tag.
This
Yeah,
guy's
she's
geeking out
amazing.
over here.
Yeah, she's geeking out.
Yes,
And
she's cracking it.
but
You
speaking
don't
of Critical Role was, well, Matt Mercer as a DM
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
actually the DM that really made me to be like, I want to
Right.
elevate my
Nice.
DM game.
Nice,
And so
nice.
my DMing style is really similar to his. I think a lot of
That's
people
That's
know
awesome.
this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is
Definitely.
very that's actually really cool. So what started first, Max? D&D or video games?
Definitely video games, but
Yeah.
like I said, because Neverwinter Nights left so much of an impact on me when I
Yes,
was younger,
yes,
it
I can
really, I think
imagine.
it really caused the D&D seed to grow back then. But I was never really exposed to D&D because, again, Singapore, and back then, like what, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that was like not really a thing back then. Yeah, but then eventually, when I grew to love video games more, I think naturally I kind of collided with D&D, and here we are.
Do you think like D&D, right? Let's say we're all gamers here, right?
Yeah.
Gamers in the truest sense of
Specialty.
I'm a
Yeah, yeah,
gamer.
yeah.
So we're all gamers here, right? We play video games and we're all DJs and we all play RPGs or we play whatever. It doesn't matter. What I'm trying to ask is, do you think it's easier for video gamers to get into D&D because it's what we know? Like it's nothing. It's not that it's nothing new. It's very similar almost because it's built off the core concepts of D&D. Like I said, the classes, the races, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, let's say you're trying to introduce someone to D&D and they were a gamer, you'd be like, yeah, easy. I can definitely get you into it because you have so much of it already under your skin, basically.
I would say it's easier for them to understand the concept of D&D, like the fantasy, high fantasy aspect. However, that being said, the type of video gamer you are really plays a part as well, because
Right.
sometimes there is a mismatch. For example, if you have video game players who prefer to play more competitively driven games or games which are or games which are more like shall we say min-maxing, which means the objective is to like create the best character you can create,
Sure.
then
Yeah.
D&D might not be the game for you, because D&D, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't have it. There are games which are just about creating, like there are D&D games which are just about creating the best character and one-shotting like enemies, for example. There are players like that, and there are DMs who don't mind running those games. It's just that if you are a DM like me, which prefers more of the narrative, and like I would rather you create a flawed character, then it's not that you can't play D&D or can't understand it. It's just more of like, if you were to join my game, then you won't enjoy it as much. You want to find a DM that can fit your style. At the same time, you also have like the competitive kind of players, like I said, who will probably be too used to the idea of like, I am playing alone. But in D&D, you can't play alone. It is not a solo game. It has to be a team-based game. So then that kind of player will also have a little bit of like a not really a culture shock, but
so
like
what you're saying
have an
is
adjustment.
what you're saying is we have to kick Tillich out of our group.
Well, if you think so.
I swear, guys, gonna fuck me. But actually, so in speaking of this, Max, because obviously roleplay is quite a difficult thing to get into, right? Because you want to stick to it, you want to commit to it. So obviously, you said you want to make a character as with similar aspects to you. But is there any other any suggestions that you can give that makes you, sort of get into the roleplay a bit more?
Normally, I like to tell players that before you make a decision in game, you just ask, especially if you're new, you just ask yourself, in this situation, try to put yourself in your character's situation for a moment. If your character is more like you, then imagine, like, just really put yourself in a situation. For example, if an ogre is charging at you wielding a great club and it's swinging it at you right now, like, how would you react if this was real life, essentially? But it gets a little bit harder if it's a character that is not like you. Then you would need to start thinking along the lines of like, okay, what do I want to say? What do I want to do? And you have to, in terms of that one, you really have to understand the character, which I think takes a lot more effort. But it's possible. It's definitely possible.
You know what would be really cool? I mean, it probably not. It's not that cool, but it sounds like a lot of it. It's kind of obviously it's role playing, right? It's about how you role play, how you pose. Can you imagine if you got like 4 method actors in there and just saw how they would react? It's like a social experiment, man. Like genuinely, right? It'd be insane. You'd be like, oh my god, this is like they would play the character. They would
genuinely
play the character. You know?
Yeah,
That'd be
which
crazy.
actually is why I think Critical Role was so big, because they're actually
Because they're all actors.
they're
Absolutely.
actors. Yeah, they're really good at
Literally.
improv. So it's because of that.
I love
Yeah.
you, Laura Bailey. What?
She's great.
It's so good. Like I just think it's there's almost an element to it. Like I mean, going back to the whole how you were talking about,
Yeah.
it teaches you a lot of skills, right? It really does.
Yep.
It's not
It
just it's not just the obvious creativity and imagination that I said before, but I can see how it does. I mean, if you're an actor, why not play D&D? It only helps. It genuinely
Yes,
only
Should
helps.
say training,
That's why.
right?
Yeah,
Like a training.
Yeah, it's like
wow.
practice.
That's
Yeah.
insane. That's crazy. I mean, it's going to be so hard for me
Yeah.
to like adapt my mind to RPing.
Exactly.
But like,
Mm.
I think when you get into it, I can see why it's so fun. It's just so much fun because it's you. You're just
Mm.
playing. You're playing in a fantasy world. How many of us don't want to live in a fantasy world? I mean, how many times did I be like, bring me to an isekai right now, man. Hit me.
Please hit me.
Hit me so I can go to an isekai world. And like, you know? And
It's gonna be-
crazy. Yeah.
It's gonna be buzzy though, because we're so used to playing games where the
Absolutely,
role playing is there and
absolutely.
stuff, right? But here you literally have to put yourself in your own
Exactly,
shoes. Essentially,
exactly.
it'll be quite interesting to see how people react to it.
It's a game where you can, I mean, like Max said, you can literally do anything. It's an open world sandbox. You can do anything. And
Yep.
I think that is just insane. That to me,
This
it blows my mind.
This could be like crack cocaine, like where you just suddenly get hooked on it, and you're just like, holy
And
shit,
you-
we're never
and
gonna do
well-
anything else.
This-
Critical Role version 2, let's get it.
There's a
There's a-
reason. Like I said, there's a reason why there are players who just never leave after they get in once.
No,
I
absolutely.
personally,
I can understand that.
yeah, I personally have a player in my game who was actually one of my colleagues back in the corporate side of things, but I realized she was also a gamer, so I thought, okay, maybe you would like the game. So I
Mhm.
invited her to join us, and she joined us for a single session, just one session. And she told me 2 weeks after that session, she just couldn't get it out of her head. And here she is. She's just stuck
Oh,
with, she's just stuck
I'm
with
so
us now.
excited. I'm
She's
so
just stuck
excited.
with us now.
I'm genuinely excited for this. Like,
One point that
yeah, sorry,
you brought up a
Rick.
bit earlier about like a flawed character, which I
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I really think I think that's like a really good idea as well, because like I suppose what you see, I think people would think when they're making like a character and stuff is like you kind of want to be like the main character sort of person, right? Everything goes your way, but then like the whole idea of having like a flawed character, or like in a game where like obviously like not everything, it's not like playing a normal game where you're gonna win at the end of the day, right?
Sure.
Like I'm sure campaigns have ended where is it like a total party wipe, right? Is that what you guys call it? Like your whole party dies and your game's
PPK,
over,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So like having that kind of is, I think, should be more highlighted, or like more. It's just very interesting
Yeah,
concept.
Makes it more relatable, doesn't it?
Yeah. Where your person has like their flaws, and this makes it
I
more
think-
interesting in the role.
Yeah, I think
More
that's
like
a really
real
good
life
point.
anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? Because, like you said, in every game, I mean, let's be honest. In every game, you know that. Okay, in 80% of the games, you know that whoever you're playing is probably going to survive to the end. It's probably going to be the god tier person, right?
Mm.
And it's the games where that doesn't happen which really stick with you, right? It's the games
Yeah.
where he's a flawed
Us.
character. He like
Yeah.
what? where they, that whoever dies or whoever messes up or does something wrong, and you're like, oh my god, I never saw that coming. Where it really sticks with you. So creating a flawed character, I can see how that makes the game even better. Like you grow with that character, it becomes he fixes his flaws or whatever it is. And I think from Max's point of view, as a narrative kind of DM, that's even like that's all
That's
he
what you
wants
live
for,
for,
right?
basically.
Yeah, that's
That's what you live for.
absolutely. That's so cool. Nah, we're very excited about this. So in terms of how you play, after you started, let's say, DMing and stuff, Max, when you play video games now, do you think do you find yourself more critical about how they narrate or tell the story?
I am definitely a very, very critical
Yeah.
player when it comes to storytelling.
Sure. Yeah.
It aggravates me to no end if I see really bad storytelling in games.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I'm not gonna lie. And you can, like, my girlfriend, you can ask her. She always hears my rants all the time when there's bad storytelling. I have so much to say. I have so much
No,
as
absolutely.
a writer myself that prides myself on good, like, well-written
Content.
stories, and then you see like AAA games with shitty ass
Absolutely.
storytelling. You're like, oh
Yeah.
my god.
Yeah.
Like, just hire me, man. Why not?
How can you even play a game anymore when you're when you're that critical? It's like you
Yeah.
don't even enjoy the game anymore at that point.
But it's the games that really hit him that much.
You
that much,
enjoy.
wow.
I guess you enjoy other aspects of the game. You can still enjoy other aspects of the game, and you just try to ignore storytelling, especially if storytelling isn't the primary driving force behind the game. Because there are many games like that. But of course, if you're playing like an RPG where the story is very important, and that's when it's like, what are you doing?
How are you feeling about World of Warcraft nowadays?
I didn't want to drop names. But yes, there you go.
Said, we're looking at you.
Genshin Impact also, to be honest. Genshin Impact is also annoying. But yeah.
So talking about that, you literally mentioned okay, if I don't expect good storytelling from the game, that's fine. But as a DM, I can't. Do you play games that aren't RPGs? Like, I can't. I'm gonna be honest, Max. I can't see you playing like an FPS or a competitive, shooter or anything like that. Because if that's your world, and I'm not saying that you can't, obviously, but I'm saying that if you love the storytelling aspect so much, why would you play anything but RPGs? Do you play any other genres?
I do play, but it's just they wouldn't really fall. They wouldn't really fall under like my favorites. But like for example, you mentioned FPS. It's not quite an FPS, but I do play games like Vermintide, which is kind of like an FPS. Sure. But it's just not. It's just not as enjoyable to me, I guess. But I can play it. I still have fun playing it. It just won't go on my top list of games. I suppose.
Like 10 games.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's just more, but and there are certain genres that I think I just can't get into. So yeah,
like give me a MOBAs,
like racing games.
Oh, okay.
Racing games. I guess MOBAs is one of them, but MOBAs. I mean, there was a period of time that I do play them, but now I don't play them.
Which MOBA did you play, Max?
League of Legends.
I played a bit of Dota, played a bit of League, played a bit of. I think these were the two main ones. Oh, played a bit of Heroes of the Storm.
Oh shit!
Those two were so big that everyone played, right?
Of course, everyone's dabbled in both.
I think everyone.
I genuinely know people who like didn't touch a MOBA.
Oh really?
They're like proper. I'm not like talking about like
elitists,
like filthy casuals. I'm talking about gamers who like play every game, but like the whole MOBA genre, they like
They just don't touch it.
I genuinely know people who do that. Yeah.
Really?
I genuinely do. I
feels like
such don't touch MOBA.
It's such an integral part of gaming now.
I feel like it's like your growing curve, right? Like you reach the stage that you're like, oh yeah, during this time I played MOBAs and I was really good, or like, and I realized I didn't like it or whatever. But I feel like everyone has touched it. But I know people genuinely was like looked at it was like, nah, fuck that.
It's the equivalent of like fucking Pokemon. Like everyone knows what Pokemon is.
Even Mario or something, right?
Other people play Pokemon. Max, you played Pokemon competitively, didn't you, for a bit?
Yeah, I still know
like
about the competitive.
Kind of like competitive.
I mean, I still know about the competitive aspect of it, but I'm not really into it as much nowadays.
I remember when I can't remember which version it was, but you're talking to me and I was like, how the fuck do you know so much? You were like, bro, I play competitively. I was like, that makes sense now. And then we were like, I was like asking you real dumb questions about what if I went into a tournament with 6 Dragonite, you'd be like, you'd be banned. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, you'll be banned, bro. I was like, oh, okay, then. No, that's
great chat.
Yeah, fun times.
I'm the type of Pokemon player who like plays for maybe like 2 hours and then I get bored and I'm like, all right,
I get it.
This shit. Let's say
I get it.
Level 99 Dragonite, punches the guy dies. All right.
That's how most people play Pokemon. Like they just play casually.
It's funny, man. It's just funny when you like go into the Elite Four and you like punch them and they die, or whatever the skill is, tackle or whatever it is.
Most players play like what full attack Pokemon, right? Like
really casually. Yeah. Really casually.
Is it not meant to be full attack? Like, am I playing Pokemon wrong?
In competitive Pokemon, you won't have all your Pokemon have like 4 attacks.
Sure.
Probably only like your main, I guess, carry, if you want to say. Yeah, your main super.
I've heard about
that's it.
Tell it. See, this is what when I was talking to Max, this is what I mean, we're not really about D&D right now, but like in the Pokemon scene, right?
Going off topic a little bit.
There's like tanks and stuff that Max was telling me. He's like, yeah, that's my tank, that's my what, this my that, and I'm like, what? I have 4 things that just hit hard. Like, I was like, oh yeah, that one has like really cool skill, and it's like Fire Blast or something. That was really cool, bro. And that's all I know.
Yeah, once it gets strong enough, you don't even care about like what's effective and not effective.
Well,
You're like,
yeah,
yeah,
you
fuck it,
just
just
press-
throw it at
yeah,
them.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
see? You go for that 120 effectiveness, and you're like, boom, I don't care about PvP, bro. I'll upgrade my PvP when I have to.
That is
Yeah,
how
it's
most
insane.
people play it, like I said.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
literally how I play Pokemon. I will admit I am not a good Pokemon player. I'm probably
No,
trash here.
it's fine. If you don't play competitive, it's fine. That's a totally perfectly acceptable way of playing it.
There's a nice way of saying he's calling you a pleb.
Yeah, he's calling me a filthy casual, bro. I feel it. So before we delve more into the video game side of things, Max, what would kind of like parting advice be for anyone looking to get into D&D or in a D&D audience in general? Like it could be anything, you know, like respect your DMs or don't be a dickhead. Like what would you say is the number one thing you want to tell people about D&D?
I think more importantly, if you want to play D&D, because I've got this a lot. If you want to play D&D and you know a group that plays D&D, you when you ask to if you can watch, don't just watch, just jump in. I think that's the I think
Do
that's
many
the
people ask
easiest.
that? Like I want to watch.
I've gotten a lot of people because they're not sure what D&D actually is and they're not sure if it's for them. They always say, "Can I sit down and watch you guys play?" And multiple times I just tell them, "No, just join us." Because if you are already interested enough to sit down, you can just jump in and play, and
Absolutely.
you will definitely be hooked. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is I think don't be afraid to try. Like I know, like for example, a lot of people they're scared of like the RP aspects like you said, and they're scared of like, will I work well as a team or stuff like that. No, just go into it, just keep an open mind, and I think you would be pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that if you like it, like I said, you'll probably just be hooked, to be very honest. Yeah. And the last thing is of course to budding DMs out there. If you want to DM, it takes effort. It takes a lot of time. It sometimes feels like a full-time unpaid job, to be honest. But it's worth it. The payoff is usually worth it. If you have a good group of players that appreciate what you do, that play the same way as you do, you need to hold on to them and you need to appreciate them, and the payoff will be worth it. That's what I'll say. Yeah.
I can imagine it because it's like when especially if people don't really play games, they're not really into gaming, and they try D&D. Imagine that it's just this one great DM that sort of flips this whole idea, and they start like they love games, they do this, they love that. Imagine you're the reason that they love games. I can imagine such a good feeling.
I've actually brought many people into the hobby in my time, which is why. And I think that's another reason why I love being a DM, because you have that ability to hook them.
Yeah.
You have that ability to be like, I know you weren't into this before, but look at you now.
No, I think
Exactly.
there is something almost like a sick satisfaction of when someone gets into your hobby with you because of you.
Yeah,
like,
kind of.
As gamers, we all have that, right? We're like, oh, come play this game with me, and then you see that
Exactly.
person enjoying that game, and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like, fuck yeah. This is why I loved it. This is why. And Ray says that to me all the time. Like, he loves it when he sees new players enjoying FF14 because he's like, yeah, I love it too. This is why I love it. And it's like a sick satisfaction to it. I mean,
it's the same effect. It's the same effect.
I feel like we keep dancing around the subject of video games. Let's get into it, Max.
Yeah, sure.
On the subject of video games, we talked about, you know, our 3x3s last week. And you actually did a 3x3 for us, which is perfect. Pop it up right now. Pop it up right now into Discord. Let's have a look at what your 3x3 is. Let's roast the shit out of Max. And let's
I think some of it is. I think some of this is probably expected. I think some of you probably get some of them.
I expect probably like 2-3 of them.
Okay.
Okay, run us through it, bro.
For the listeners, go through it.
So, Mass Effect. First one on the list. It's not in any particular order. Do I have to explain?
No. We'll go through that later.
Okay, sure. So Mass Effect, the whole trilogy, Pokemon Sapphire, XCOM 2, Witcher 3, Final Fantasy 14, Shadowbringers, Darkest Dungeon, Hades, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and Dragon Age.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
so close to my heart.
This
is why. Like, but I mean, off recording for the listeners is I told everyone in this chat that Max probably has the closest taste of RPGs to me that I know in this group right now, and you can see why. I mean, half of these games I'm like, bang on, tick, like easy ticks just across the board.
Take of approval from Gaius. Stamp of approval.
Yeah.
I'm not a connoisseur enough, man. I got hated on a lot for my fucking Puzzle Pirates. Fuck all of you for Puzzle Pirates. Max,
I'm
I want
not
to ask you
surprised.
about Darkest Dungeon. What is Darkest Dungeon? I've never
Yes.
I
heard
was
about
just
it.
gonna say it as well.
Yeah.
So Darkest Dungeon is, well, the best way I could describe it, it's kind of like a turn-based roguelike. But
Okay.
I'm not sure if roguelike.
Oh.
I'm not sure if roguelike is the best word for it.
Okay.
But essentially, the game when it first released, if for those of you unaware, it is a very, very brutal game. It is a game that you will lose characters, you will die, you will fail,
Oh,
and it's
no.
meant to happen.
Right.
It's meant to happen. And but it is also really, really satisfying when you manage to pull
Absolutely.
off tactics or when you manage to put off strategies in order to win the fights. But some of the fights, when you first play it, especially if you're inexperienced and you don't know what the game is about, and
Yeah.
you go into it, you're just gonna get slaughtered, and it's going to happen. And some of the fights just seem straight up
Damn.
unfair. Yeah,
Oh,
but that's the way.
wow.
That's the game design. That's how it's designed.
That's cool.
Is
I
it
think-
an indie game or?
Kind of indie. It's kind of indie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like
Sorry,
I've,
Tim, you were
I've,
saying?
no. I feel like I just Google image it. I think I've definitely seen some streamers play it, and
Yes.
they always abandon halfway because they're like, "This is just like too
It's so hard.
emotionally fucking punching as well." It's just like fuck
Yes.
sakes. Like,
But I'm kind of like, I mean, I personally like it for two reasons. One is
Yeah.
because the challenge is there, and the fact that it's turn-based, and I kind of like turn-based. Some of the games up there are turn-based anyway. And also, the second aspect is because of the whole theme, the whole gothic horror, eldritch horror kind
Sure,
of theme. And I'm
sure.
like, I
Right,
love
right.
that shit.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love
Sure.
that shit.
No, I
mean,
get it.
Lovecraftian-
Lovecraftian
Cool.
horror. I love that shit.
Lovecraftian horror, of
That's so
course,
good.
of course. Do
Yeah.
you incorporate that much into your kind of DMing?
Well,
Lovecraftian horror, that kind of stuff.
There are times that I do include enemies that are based off like more Cthulhu-esque enemies.
Guess we'll be fighting a
Lovecraftian
squid then,
enemies,
won't we,
yeah.
boys?
Or sometimes, well, it depends because the fun thing is as a DM you can put in any enemies that
Yeah,
you like.
absolutely,
So like
absolutely.
I'm like, well, if I feel like
Cool.
it, I can just put in like a Lovecraftian one. If I feel like
Yeah,
it, I can put in,
yeah.
like a vampire. It's up to me.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Wow.
delve into this 3x3. So straight off the bat, first on the list, obviously in no order, but Mass Effect Legendary Edition.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I
I
mean-
agree with this very strongly.
Nothing much to
is
say
it?
there.
Yeah, what is it
Um,
for Mass Effect that speaks to you so highly?
Well, I know many people would say story, but for me, while the story is good, what really hooked me in this game is actually the characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The characters and how they're written and the arcs that they go through. I think that's the thing that hooked me. And then, of course, secondly would be the actual story itself.
Yeah.
They did kind of initially screw up the story a little bit
Yep.
in the third game.
Yeah.
Third game, but they redeemed themselves. And I think the characters, even though the third game had a little bit of a storytelling error, the characters itself still managed to save the game. So that's why I think the characters are really the thing that sticks out
Wow.
in this game.
I
Yeah.
think we were talking about this off air, Max. But what we kind of agreed on that was yes, Mass Effect 3 on its own standalone. The ending was let's be honest, the first ending was shit before the extended edition. The
Yeah.
first ending was piss poor. Extended edition kind of saved it, but on its own, it left the impression of like, oh, this is pretty bad. This is pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
But then when you play the Legendary edition, for people who don't know, it's 1, 2, and 3 all stacked together, right? It's something fine. It's a really good game. You're like, oh my god, this ending makes sense. It's perfect. Bang
If
on.
you play all three of them back to
Right?
back, then yeah.
It's so weird that when you play
Yeah.
3 on its own, you're like, this is trash tier. You play all 3 of them together, you're like, yeah, straight out,
It's not-
10 out of 10, hit the box.
It's
It
not
must be like
trash
a
to you, but
context
yeah.
thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It must
it
be
was
a context
really,
thing.
really bad for. I mean,
No, I think it's because when you played the original before all
Yes.
3 of them were released, you had that break in between, so the memory
Yes.
wasn't as fresh.
Exactly.
But then
yes.
if you play all 3 of them, then the memory is fresh in your mind. And it definitely feels like it flows better.
Do you also think it's because you would have played 3 after the goddamn masterpiece that was 2? There's no, like, I don't know a single person who doesn't think Mass Effect 2 is, like, by far one of the best, like, in the game, in the series, whatever it is. Like, personally, I prefer 3, but I have to say 2 is very, 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 very good, you know? So
2
you
is
play
good.
2, and then you go into 3, and the original ending hits you, and you're like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is great.
2 is good, but the storytelling in 2, the overarching plot of 2 doesn't really cut it for me. Because
see.
I feel like the entirety of the plot in 2 could actually be relegated to like a side quest in 3, for example.
It's
Okay.
it's cool having someone more critical to also analyze all the storylines for this.
Absolutely. Yeah, someone
True,
who's
true.
actually a storyteller, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Uh,
flattered. I'm nowhere near as good as some of them, but yeah.
Yeah. Pokemon Sapphire. One of
Yeah.
personally one of my favorites as well. Like I
Goats.
love the Sapphire Emerald
Okay.
My
series.
first Pokemon game as well.
I played
Really,
Ruby,
T?
guys.
The
Yeah,
reason
my
why.
fir-
Okay. No,
Okay.
you could go. You could go.
No, it's just I was just saying it's my first Game Boy DS color game, and I actually don't know how many hours I put into it,
It
but
was so good.
it was just so
Yeah.
good, man. So good. But yeah,
Yeah.
go, take it away, Max.
The reason why I put it up there was because I think Sapphire was the first game that, well, first of all, it's the first Pokemon game that I kept playing over and over. But
Mhm.
also, it's the first Pokemon game that really made me realize how much I love the franchise. Because
Yeah,
I'm a Gen
agree.
1er. Like I started in Gen 1, but
Yeah.
I
Oh.
was like, okay, Gen 1 was good, but I never played it as much as I did with
Yeah.
Sapphire.
Yeah.
Gen 2
Yeah.
was good as well, but I never played it as much as Sapphire.
Yeah.
And I think immediately after Gen 4 came out, that was when I really started to be like, okay, I want to take this a bit more seriously. And so I went into the competitive aspect of it. But I think Sapphire was the one that started it. That's why it's up there.
I think it's
yeah.
what,
Sorry,
something that I thought really, I'm hearing you say that is like, especially I don't know when you started like Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, but I feel like this generation lines up with the age where most players are like can go more deeply into a game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
the timing lined up very well
That is
for
true.
this generation.
But the
Yeah.
thing was, like, I have to agree to a point, but I feel like Sapphire Sapphire's Gen 3, right?
Sapphire Gen 3, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like after kind of Silver and Gold, I don't know, maybe it was the color, maybe it was whatever it was. It just went from good to tremendously good. Like Sapphire is
Yeah,
so
yeah.
goddamn good. Like I don't even know how to describe it. Like playing Pokemon Sapphire after playing, I started Gen 1 as well, right? I played 1, 2, and then I played Sapphire, and it was like almost like a whole different thing.
Yeah.
It was just
yeah.
that much better. It was
It's the
just like
graphical upgrades, I think.
right?
The
They
hardware
took
changed as
everything
well,
you
right?
loved about it, and they just made it so good. Like I just loved everything about it. And I have to agree. Like hands down, Sapphire is probably one of the best
Sapphire
games
Yeah,
I've
on
ever played.
the
Yep,
DS,
yep.
right?
Yes.
No,
Is it?
Sapphire was Game Boy Advance.
Oh,
Game Boy
Oh my
Advance
god, the
color.
GBA! I forgot the
Yeah.
GBA even
Yeah,
existed.
that's
Oh
what
my
I started
god!
on.
Oh
Yeah.
Game
my
Boy
god,
Advance.
what a throwback! The GBA was the one where you had like buttons that you can turn the backlighting brighter on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's the one.
You gotta save
That's a-
battery, so you turn it off.
That's
Like.
a big Digivice, bro.
Yeah, that's the one.
It's so
XCOM
cool.
2. Let's talk about XCOM 2. Let's talk
Actually,
about it.
yeah, XCOM 2. I want to ask you, so why not XCOM 1?
Well, actually, when I put XCOM 2, it's more of just the XCOM in general. But I think
Ah.
XCOM 2 really upgraded what was in the original Enemy Unknown. Not the original, the really old one, like XCOM Enemy Unknown. Yeah, but it really upgraded a lot of what was already there. And then they came out with the really, really, really great DLC, The War of the Chosen, and that one was just that blew everything else out of the water.
Oh, so
Right.
I
Yeah.
never heard about that one.
That
Yeah.
one is really good. Like they basically, essentially, it's a DLC for XCOM 2, but it genuinely feels like a full game in itself.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell it, are you like me? I play the base games and I actually never bother about DLCs. Like I finish the game, I'm like done. But Max always tells me, buy this DLC, buy that DLC. This one is worth it, this one's not worth it. So like I'm like, whenever I play RPGs, Max is like, yeah, for example, Mass Effect, right? Citadel, I would never have got it without him telling me. And Citadel is the best DLC of the Mass Effect series.
Oh wow.
It's so good.
I always just look at DLCs as like a money sink. So I'm like,
Exactly,
yeah.
Some of them are not worth the money. It's true. Some of them are
Absolutely.
I
but
love
some of them are really worth it.
I love the fucking DLCs that cost you like fucking $20 and it's like a weapon pack that you don't even
Yeah.
need because you
Oh,
already finished
right.
the game and you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah, don't buy
It's like,
those.
yeah, this weapon pack. It's like
Don't buy those.
It's like the most trashiest stuff that you don't need because you finished the game or like whatever, you know.
Or like a skin. Yeah, don't buy those.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
man, so bad.
Spend
There's
so
just-
much fucking money on skins.
Yeah, I know, right? T, I know. Let's talk about that later. We'll also ask Max about how he feels about the microtransaction side of things.
No skins and stuff in D&D. So hey, that's great.
So we can look however we want to look. You can be carrying your fake Karen bit in there, my boy. So what is it? Yeah, talking about the whole XCOM 2 for would you say XCOM's mainstream, guys? I don't know
No.
many other
It
people who play
was,
XCOM. Yeah.
I knew my friend group was into it for a little while,
Yeah,
but I didn't
yeah.
know about the general.
It's a tactical kind of
Turn-based,
turn-based,
right?
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a tactical.
Mm.
It's a tactical RPG, and I think people who like these sort of games,
Like FFT, Divinity.
they would like this. They would like XCOM.
Yeah.
Of course, XCOM is more sci-fi. It's more sci-fi. It's not like fantasy, but it's still
No.
good.
Are you a sci-fi guy, Max?
I don't mind
Or-
sci-fi.
or
I mean,
more
there are
fantasy?
like 2 sci-fi games. The 3 sci-fi games on my list. So
Oh shit! Yeah, I didn't even notice the third one. Yeah, no.
yeah,
I forgot. KOTOR was in here. Oh, wait, not KOTOR. Star Wars Knights. Yeah, it's on here.
no, that's KOTOR. Yeah,
Is it KOTOR? Wait,
It's
where's the
KOTOR.
top? Oh yeah, The Old Republic. Of course.
Yeah.
Anyway,
What
so
is
you
it?
are a
Is
sci-fi
it-
guy because for the longest time I
Yeah.
thought you were like a high fantasy guy, Max.
I prefer high fantasy. That's
Right.
for sure. But that
Okay.
doesn't mean I don't like sci-fi. I like sci-fi.
Yeah.
Too.
No, I have
Yeah.
to say I love high fantasy. So there's something about elves and fucking dwarves and shit just hits the sweet spot of like perfect of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
gaming or anything. Yeah,
I like both.
absolutely. Sorry, were you saying something, T?
No, I'm just trying to think because with XCOM,
Yeah.
I'm still trying to follow your DM lifestyle. Was it the storyline? What was it about like XCOM that really pulled you in?
I think for XCOM, it's not really the story. XCOM is one of those that
Yeah.
it's definitely more of just the gameplay aspect. But I guess for me, the reason why XCOM had an additional layer of not complexity, but like of attachment is because you can design your own characters in the
Right.
game. And when I design my own characters, I give them stories. So it
Oh.
means more to me if they die because I had
Right.
like a whole story. And then if let's say there's a character in the game that kind of like makes it to the end or like he becomes like one of my best soldiers, then I will
Yeah.
elaborate more on their story, create an entire like
Holy
short
shit!
character storyline for them. So that's my own way of enjoying the game in a different aspect
Yeah,
of like as compared to how most people would do it. I
you're
suppose.
playing like
No.
a game within a game.
Kind of.
Gameception
Yeah,
right here, bro.
kind of. Yeah. And so that creates that additional new story for me. Like I would be able to write, like for example, if one of the soldiers that I grew attached to actually died, then I would be able to write the story in my head of why they died, like I don't know, like a journal entry or something. And it's like,
We
oh,
are
this
two-
soldier, yeah.
We are two very different people. I think I dropped XCOM after like one character I was really attached to died. I literally uninstalled the game. I was like, "Fuck this shit."
No, it's sad. It's definitely sad. It's definitely
Mm.
sad. Yeah, it doesn't change the fact that you still get sad when they die. That's for sure.
Absolutely,
For sure.
absolutely. So, okay, we've covered the top 3. We have to speak about the 4th on the list. I mean, it's like in what 75% of our 3x3.
Yeah, I
right
think
now.
so.
Mr.
Mm.
Raymond over here really needs to get onto it. The classic Witcher 3, not even the classic, the god tier Witcher 3,
Witcher
the
3, yeah.
Wild Hunt. Are you talking about Witcher 3 base game or plus all the DLCs or just in general?
So what I've heard before we go into
Yes.
this, I heard
Yes.
is it Blood and Wine is really good? Is that the only one?
Funny, yeah, the DLCs.
That's a DLC, yeah.
Yeah. The DLC
I-
Blood and
Blood
Wine's
and
a
Wine.
DLC.
Yeah, it is a DLC, but I don't know, Max. What do you think about Blood and Wine being the best DLC? I wouldn't say it is.
I mean, I don't know if there's a DLC that can be classified as the
that
best
is
DLC
true.
of all time. But Blood and Wine was one of those DLCs added to a game where, again, it feels like they gave you another game or like half a game, maybe.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
what
Yeah.
it's like a lot of content for
A
for
lot of
a
content.
It's a
Yes.
lot of content.
It's a lot of content.
I think Blood and Wine is really good for people who've read the books. Like, because I've
Oh.
read the books when I can't say who, when a certain character appeared, I was like, holy shit, right?
You don't,
Uh,
but I feel like you don't have to. The good
oh, no,
thing
you
about
don't have
Witcher
to,
3,
absolutely.
yeah, the good thing about Witcher 3 is that you don't have to have read the books.
Yeah.
You can still enjoy it.
Blood and Wine's world is beautiful as well. Like, it's so aesthetic. Toussaint is so
Oh,
beautiful.
man.
Like, it's by far one of the best.
Oh,
But
is
I
it
would
the
actually
new-
say I prefer the story of Heart of Stone better. Hearts of Stone. It's
Hearts
so
of Stone, yeah.
It's so good. The Hearts
Hearts
of
of
Stone
Stone-
is so
Hearts
good.
of Stone is a really amazing story.
right.
Blood and Wine
it's-
is not too bad of a story, but there's a reason why Blood and Wine is better for me, and that's because if you knew me as a DM more and you knew the kind of in terms of high fantasy what kind of monsters I like, my favorite monster, fantasy monster, is vampires.
Right.
That's why-
Okay.
That's why Blood and Wine.
Right.
That's why Blood and Wine
Right.
wins. That's the only reason why Blood and Wine wins. because
Blood-
it's literally all about vampires.
I mean, Blood and Wine. I mean, there's no way you can say Blood and Wine was bad. They're both very
No, they're
very
both
top-tier
excellent.
DLC. It's
They're both
insane
excellent.
how good the quality of the DLCs were for Witcher
Yeah.
3. To be honest,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were both basically standalone games. Like Hearts of Stone was, oh my god, man, it was just so good when it came out, and then it hit with Blood and Wine, which was equally, if not better. Personally, I prefer Heart of Stone, but Blood and Wine, I can't fault it. I really can't fault it. Maybe you could say, oh, it's a bit, I don't know, predictable. Maybe I don't know. But and maybe the sex scene was weaker. I don't know, but it's really good. I mean, it is. The sex scene in that was terrible. Okay, it was terrible. It was really bad.
Which one
right?
did you like better, T? Did you play them both?
I actually got into it recently during lockdown.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't finish Blood and Wine. I finished Hearts of Stone, but I think I was played it for like 4 weeks back to, oh, not 4 weeks, 3 weeks back to back, and I think I got burnt out a bit before I could finish it. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I couldn't finish it. But I honestly, I was telling the guys this the other day, is that I tried to play it on PC and dropped it within half an hour because I just I didn't like how clunky it was. But the moment I picked it up on a console was really nice. I actually really enjoyed it on like the PS4 and shit.
What a console peasant.
Max, would you say that Witcher 3 is like your number one RPG of all time?
Yes, actually, I would say so. I mean, there are a few that come close, like the others on the list, Mass Effect and Dragon Age and everything.
Uh-huh.
But I do think the most polished one does feel like is Witcher 3. So
Right.
for sure.
Spicy.
I haven't tried this game.
No, you have to, right? You won't regret it. It's just if you like the storytelling aspect of FF, there's no way you won't like Witcher 3. Witcher 3 is so strong as a story, and then you throw in the characters, which are just as strong, and then you throw in the fact that, okay, I will admit on PC the mechanics are pretty clunky, but it's fun. Like the fights are fun. The side quests are all unique. There's no fetch quest. There's no like run to Gridania 50 fucking times. It's good, solid side quests. There's really nothing you can fault about it apart from, I would say, the movement and the fights. They are clunky as fuck sometimes. Like they're like, what the fuck is wrong with the mechanics, bro? Like your horse like moves in the weirdest diagonals and shit, and you're like, what's happening? Why is Roche like that, bro?
The easiest way to do this, Ray, is like I'm generally not a huge RPG fan. Like I sort of just get bored halfway through because I feel like I can't be bothered. I basically pulled an all-nighter on the first night I was playing The Witcher 3.
It's really good. It's genuinely really good. It's just
so it is.
Pretty good story, good fun, everything.
And it's still good even now. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I mean, like, when you have time. Next on the list, obviously, the good old FF14. Can't talk to Max without talking about FF14.
I had to put it in the center. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I think like a lot of people who played this game very recently, they really got into it because of the story. That's for sure. I have a hot take, and I know a lot of people won't agree with me.
Oh, I'm ready.
The story is good. It's excellent, but it's not nearly as legendary as a lot of people.
Oh my god!
Yes.
The reason why people think it's good is because I think they've just suffered too much from bad storytelling in gaming.
Oh god.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think why it's good, it's because they had the opportunity to set up a lot of the payoffs very, very early on with their previous expansion. So when you come to the big payoff, which is Shadowbringers and probably Endwalker, then it really feels amazing. But to be very honest, if you look at the way that the story is written, it's still good, don't get me wrong, but the reason why it's not like legendary is because the only reason why it's good is because, like, the villain is well written, the motives are well written and everything. And I think, again, like I said, gamers have just suffered from really bad writing in gaming industry in general. So when there's a really good villain, they're just like, oh my god, but then you're like, it's not the best villain, it's just a well-written villain. Exactly. It's just a well-written villain, that's all. It's not like a legendary villain.
The comparative.
Finally, my opinions are backed up by a proper critical storyteller.
Guys is not by himself this time.
I am dedicated.
But don't get me wrong, it is still very good. It is still very good, but it's not like as legendary as
my argument has always been that FF's 14 storyline is probably best of its class in terms of MMOs right now.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah,
right?
that's for sure.
That's
That's for
what
sure.
Shadowlands, yeah, hands down.
That's for sure.
You put Shadowbringers versus Shadowlands. Oh my god, it's not a competition, right?
It's not even a
It's
competition.
not
Yeah.
even a competition. MMOs wise, it's really strong, but you want to stack it up against other RPGs. It's all right. It's all right.
It's like it's on the
not
same level.
fantastic.
It's
Yeah,
on the same level.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what's always annoyed me, that my quote unquote hot take is such a hot take. But it's really just me being like, wait, it's all right. It's not that great. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. That's all I'm saying. And then people hate on me because of it. They're
Yeah,
like, nah,
so-
man, FF14 has the best story in the world and all that. And I'm like,
So
Okay,
Max, we have
then.
a running joke in the podcast where Geiss is just a fucking antagonist, and he just goes against. He's just
I can see
hates
that.
everything
I can
mainstream.
see that. I can
I'm
see it.
really fucking not, all right? I got vindicated by Max just right
Yeah,
here.
I wish you did
Someone
vindicate
who-
him.
No. Someone who loves FF14 as well, someone who is a storyteller, is literally agreeing with me. So I have all the rights in the world, right? I am the.
No,
I'm so happy.
Max just messaged me that you paid him off, so I don't really
Oh
believe
shit,
you.
bro! You can't tell this on stream,
Max, you
bro.
being a paid actor now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do get paid to act technically. So
Oh man.
why
No.
you believe everything I say?
But
Why
I
would you
do
believe a single
100% agree with that. And I think, to be fair, Ray agrees to an extent as well. He's just not as angry about it as me. Because you don't understand, he doesn't get attacked for it as much as I do.
Yeah, I know.
Nah, man, it's the best. How dare you say so? I'm like, okay, man, whatever. All right. When I said, what did I say, Ray, recently? Heaven's What was predictable. Bro, people jumped on me, and I'm like, it is predictable. It's a fucking dragon story. What do you mean?
It had to be predictable
Right?
for that.
It's
expansion.
literally okay.
No,
let me
I
describe
personally-
it to you. There is a dragon killing village. There are dragons, and there's also a religious church aspect to it. What could happen? Like, come on, man, come on. Obviously,
I don't mind if a story is predictable if the storytelling is good.
It's good.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I
fair
don't
enough.
mind. Yeah, I don't mind.
I heard
I'm
someone.
just trying to say it. I'm just trying to say that the story is not as legendary as people think.
Yes,
That's all.
I do
Yeah.
agree. It is good though. It is good. There's no way.
It is
to
good. It is very good. Yeah.
It's just not like fucking game changing. Is what I'm trying to say.
Right,
Also,
right.
like, there are parts which genuinely infuriate me about it, and that's usually the JRPG side
Tropes.
of it, like
All
the
the
tropes or the things
Yep.
where like the cutscenes are often 50 hours longer than they have to be, bro. And it's like, what? It's like a genuine 15-minute cutscene of like one character walking, and you're like, what? Just what? Just get there, like just show me after he gets there or whatever it is. And that's what really frustrates me about it. And also that classic JRPG trope of like, oh, but wait, there's a bigger monster, and that really infuriates me. Like, I mean, I could name so many, but I don't really want to spoil it because there's a lot of new players into the FF.
No, it's
world and
okay.
all
It's
that.
okay. Yeah,
Like,
it's okay.
you know what I'm talking about. I can describe. I'll say it right here in Heaven's Ward. That annoying part. You know what I'm talking about.
It's okay.
There's a drop and there's a hole. Okay, you know what I'm talking about right now. Okay, in Stormblood, when someone comes back, and Shadowbringers, when someone comes back, that just infuriates me. When someone dies, just kill them all. It's like Naruto all over again with pain raising everyone up they kill.
But that's more of a
Right.
Japanese JRPG thing, I think.
Exactly. And I'm saying that like just because it's a JRPG doesn't mean it has to follow those tropes, because
No,
it's
I know.
breaking so many. It's breaking so many tropes, and it's such a good MMO, such a good RPG. And then they do these things, and I'm just like, oh my fucking god, seriously? Like, this is just
ending.
annoying. It's just annoying. But
The
enough
cheap-
about my rants.
Yeah,
Raymond,
there we
you
go.
love FF14 as well. What is I mean, like Max, your favorite is obviously Shadowbringers, yeah?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. And what about you, Ray?
Shadowbringers is definitely the highlight, especially what Max said is like everything's built up, and a lot of it has been explained in Shadowbringers as well. That's why like you feel like when you make your character, you get like invested in them, right? It's MMO, you invest in your character, and then to see them reach those points in the story is like pretty cool.
I do like that they in all the cutscenes you can see your like character and how they interact, and like it feels personal almost in a way. It's like, oh yeah, that's me.
And
Yeah,
I
no,
will
no.
say though,
Yeah, sorry, you go.
while I enjoy Shadowbringers' story, the actual gameplay aspect of it, I prefer Endgame Stormblood, but that's just me.
Nice. I do
Because
like
I
Stormblood
think
more as well.
I think Stormblood's trials and Stormblood's dungeons and everything, and like the Alliance raid and all that were a lot more interesting. Okay, actually no, Alliance raid for Shadowbringers is still better, but the end game content, like the
Right.
8-man raids, I think the 8-man raids and the extremes and all that in Stormblood were better, at least for me.
I feel like they simplified a lot of things in Shadowbringers.
Yeah,
Make
yeah,
it more
that's
FBA.
the thing that I'm still complaining to this day, where I am always saying in Shadowbringers, like all these new tanks, they wouldn't be able to tank if it's in Stormblood.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, it's really different. Really different.
I feel like people there is a tendency for gaming companies to do that, right? To almost like make it easier for new players.
It's
same
good for
with-
them because
with
now they
any
have an
game,
influx
yeah.
of players. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good for them in that regard.
It's good for them in that
But
regard.
the funny thing is, we say that, but they still have to make it through ARR, H-Dub, Stormblood, and then into Shadowbringers. So like
It's
they
good,
make the last one the easier one, but like
Yeah.
ARR is so hard to get through.
I feel like I don't know what they're gonna do if they come up with a 6 or 7 expansion, because there's no way that people are gonna stay invested in it if they're starting. If they have to start from AR again and finish like 7 expansions just to get to the latest content.
I
don't
think
know.
they might be waiting for some sort of a way to do the like a transition after that, after this main arc ends in Endwalker.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like they will
open a
they will
new
redo.
world.
Yeah, they might redo it or something, but we'll
They
see.
could have done it with S-Dub. SH-Dub actually. Right?
Yeah.
Shadowbringers. Surely they could have.
They
It was like
could
literally a
have.
new world.
Yeah, they could
Well, you
have.
know,
but I
we'll-
mean,
we'll
like,
leave-
it was
Yoshi-
a lot of it was tied to the previous.
We'll see what happens when the
Yeah.
time comes.
Yeah.
I'm sure we will.
Okay,
I'm
um,
sitting here. I'm
The
sitting
T
here.
has to
I
start.
think,
Yeah.
dude, I'm sitting here thinking, how many fucking FF14s are there, my dude? Like, what?
So
rank?
FF14 is the MMO, right? See, so it's the
Yeah.
the MMORPG.
But there are
so there's a
15.
lot of
There are 15
expansions
Final
to it.
Fantasies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Okay. Nice.
So
I
there's-
get
So
it, right?
the
So
Final,
it's
the
like-
Final Fantasy franchise has 15 games.
yeah. But
But-
14 in itself has how many
But
fucking?
14,
It has expansions.
14
It's
has
like, wow.
14 has 3 expansions.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's
Yeah.
fine.
So it's like,
Fantastic.
Burning Crusade.
Yeah.
Rock
And
the
the
Ring,
fourth one,
Right.
one's on the way. Fourth one's
Yeah.
coming,
Right.
dropping like in November. So yeah.
Oh shit,
So you
spicy.
better get started, T, so we can talk about it.
I'll
We
start
could,
this.
we could generally, like, we could literally create an entire podcast of 14 as well. So
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
there's just
big
so
guys
much
complaining.
to talk about. There's
It'll
so
just
much
be
to
me
talk
being
about.
angry about it, bro.
There's
It'll
just
be
so
me,
much to
like
talk about.
ranting about it. Before T falls asleep, let's talk about Hades. Hades is. I've said this in the previous podcast. Hades is definitely one of my top mentions as well. Hades is just so mindlessly good. And Max himself introduced me to Hades, and he literally said to me,
Oh really?
I've never had anyone tell me Hades was bad after I introduced it to them. Genuinely, he said that to me. And I
Damn.
played it within the first day. I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. It's fucking good. It's just so
It
fucking
is.
good.
It is.
What is it about
but-
Hades that you love so much?
I actually have never liked roguelikes,
Yeah.
like actual action roguelikes until
Yeah.
Hades. And
Yeah.
I think I don't know, I really don't know what is it about Hades, but I think it's just how customizable everything is. And also I have always loved Supergiant's art style, so that's one thing.
Yes.
Mm.
And Greek mythology is another thing that pulled me in. And I think the thing that eventually made me stay, and I think Gaius knows this, and also make me get literally all the achievements there is to get in Hades, is because their storytelling is told in such a special way, which is just, it's hidden throughout the gameplay, and you
Yeah.
wouldn't, if you weren't really looking out specifically for it, you might not realize that they're actually telling you
Mhm.
parts of the story. And they do this with not just the main overarching story between Zagreus and Hades, but they do that with like every single other side
Yeah.
character as well. And I
Yeah.
think that's one thing that is like, it's hidden so well and it's embedded so seamlessly into gameplay that I think it's worth a mention. Like there's barely any cutscenes, so to speak. There aren't any
Yeah.
cutscenes actually.
There aren't any
Yeah.
customs,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
and I
think
think that's one really special thing.
It's such a
about it.
unique way of telling the story where you can literally get to end game, right? And then realize, wow, that's not even 10%.
No.
You know,
No,
you
yeah.
finish the game and you're like, oh my god, I haven't.
You
finished
finish the game
anything.
once and you realize you like,
Yeah.
that's where the game just started.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I have to finish it another 10 times to then get onto the stepping field of saying I started the game. Like it's
Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
big game, and yet at the same time, it's not. It's really simple premise. You fight,
It
you
is.
die, you fight, you die, and that's
It is,
literally
it
it. That's all
Yeah,
it
it
is.
is.
But it's so mindlessly fun, and it's one of those games where I feel like you can play without being invested in a way, Max? Do you think so? Like, you don't have to go really in depth. You can just jump on,
Oh, for
play
sure.
an hour, and then
For
jump
sure.
off. No problem.
Yeah, for sure. I have met both kinds of players in Hades. I've met the really hardcore kind that they go for all the strong builds and stuff, and then I've also met the casual ones where it's like, I'll just take whatever and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
And
it's just
both
really
work.
fun.
Both work.
Yeah, exactly. To be fair, I've always said this. It's the games that you don't really because I didn't know whether there was much hype when Hades came out, but it's the games that you pick up and just end up being the best fucking game you ever played because there's no hype around it. It just makes the game 10 times better, in my opinion, at least.
Yes, exactly. Which to me is also kind of like what Darkest Dungeon is. Yeah.
And
Right.
Hollow
Oh,
Knight,
shit.
all those kind of games. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
Hollow Knight was also
Hollow
a
Knight's so
great
good.
game. Hollow Knight is a great
Fantastic.
game.
Supergiant does that so well, though. You know, like there should be hype about Supergiant games now, and there is. Jesus Christ, and
Oh my
there
god,
is.
that just scared the shit out of me. Sorry.
and there is, right. There is that kind of hype about Supergiant because Supergiant has really made a name for itself. But I also feel like at the end of the day, we always will think of Supergiant as that indie company, right? Oh yeah, let's do indie, let's do this, let's do that, and yet they just churn out bangers, like just boom, boom, boom. Ever since Bastion, it goes Transistor.
That was their first game.
It's just insane.
Bastion
They're all good.
Bastion was their first game. Yeah.
Right? It goes
That
Bastion,
was
then
good
bam,
as
bam, bam, bam,
well.
bam. Everything's just good. And
Yep.
and sadly, that's something not even AAAs can do, and they have all the money in the world. They have so much.
I think that's
money,
because I genuinely think that's because AAA games have kind of corporatized themselves,
Yes.
so they focus a bit too much on the money, and so their creative drive is gone. That's what I think, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. It doesn't. It's not hard to figure that out when you see the 7th reskin COD, or the 7th reskin FIFA, or the 7th reskin
and Assassin's
fucking
Creed
anything,
and
right?
stuff.
And Assassin's Creed, whatever.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about KOTOR. I have not played KOTOR. It's an MMO, is it not?
Yes, no, KOTOR. Well, the MMO is SWTOR, which is the Old Republic.
Right.
But KOTOR was Knights of the Old Republic, which is the one that's getting a remake. That one was an old RPG.
Wait, is this the one that
that's
one of this being remade, right? The MM.
Yeah, this is the one. This is the one that's being remade.
Right.
This is the one that's being remade.
Is it an MMO or not an MMO?
No, it's RPG.
Oh, it's not an MMO. It's an RPG. It's a single player RPG.
Okay.
And I specifically want to highlight this because it's made by BioWare.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. It's the one
Yes.
that's made by BioWare. Yes.
It's one of the original like first few RPGs that BioWare ever made.
BioWare can do no wrong right now for me. Like,
And,
there is Andromeda and there is Anthem.
So
Okay.
KOTOR,
It can do wrong.
I think KOTOR was one of those that was one of the first few RPGs I ever played, which then I think got me into RPGs. So yeah, because it's really old. It's really old.
Exactly, yeah. My older brother used to play this, and I was
It's
like,
really
what
old.
the fuck is going on? But it's Star Wars, and we all love Star Wars, so it's always like a big win in our books.
Yeah. The characterization in here is also pretty good, and then again, BioWare does characters really well. And the story in general, the main story for this was actually really good because there is a very, very huge plot twist. I don't want to spoil it, but there's a very huge plot twist that is. When I was playing it for the first time when I was young, I was like, "What the fuck?" My mind was blown. So yeah.
I'm actually going to get a remastered then. I'm actually going to get.
Yeah. So are they?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
They're just remastering it, right? They're not changing anything.
I don't know for sure, but yeah.
Ooh, okay, spicy. Because like I was talking to guys about this now 3x3s. It's just that I would love to play the older games, but the graphics of the older games make me want to wrap my eyes around.
I can't play Dragon Age Inquisition, Dragon Age Origins anymore. It's like, oh my god, what am I looking at?
And of course, not to mention, it is Star Wars, so the universe is already set, and because of that, it's definitely a lot more interesting as well.
That's awesome. I'm gonna get it. 100%.
But just put it this way. So in Star Wars, in KOTOR specifically, and the era of Star Wars that I think most people who only watch the movies won't know about, they introduce a character in there. Again, little bit of a spoiler, but it's Revan. His name is Revan. And I always tell people, if you think that Darth Vader is iconic, wait till you see Revan.
I'm excited. I'm gonna get
That's a big call.
Yeah.
Because
Star Wars. What more can you want?
Because you said, Max, like obviously when as a DM, you said you made your first one based on what was it? Warcraft,
Azeroth,
right? Did you use any other inspiration like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings? Did you pull from anything else?
Well, when I created my own world, I started to pull from other sources. So that was when I stole some ideas from Azeroth. I stole some ideas from Pathfinder's world. I stole some ideas from Lord of the Rings and Warhammer and stuff. So yeah, I when I created Azeroth, of course, that was just based off Azeroth. But when I made
Right.
my own world, like the one that I'm currently playing in, that's when it drew inspiration from a lot of different places. Like even Witcher has some inspiration in there as well.
Oh shit! Yeah, of
You
course.
just hit like 3 out of 3 of Tillich's most loved franchises: Lord of the Rings, Azeroth. What was the
'Cause you
last
can't
one?
help it.
Lord of the Rings, Azeroth, and
Warhammer.
Warhammer. Yeah, like literally
Yeah.
3 out of 3 of Tillich's loved
100%.
franchises.
Yeah, because you
Which,
can't
like,
help it when
yeah,
you.
absolutely.
It just happens. Like you don't like choose for it to be fucking added in. You're just like, oh my god, it happened.
I love this. It's so great.
It's big. I mean, I draw from a lot of well-developed game
Mm.
worlds, and that's
Mm.
why all those are in the list. Because as much as I know Blizzard's fucking up WoW and all that right now,
Azeroth
but
is
Azeroth,
beautiful. I love
like
Azeroth,
the
yeah.
world is good. The world and the setting is good. It's just the story that isn't. But yeah,
Right,
No,
right.
amen, brother, amen.
All
Yep.
right, let's get to the last one. The last one on the list: Dragon Age Inquisition. Now, why Inquisition over the others?
okay. I like the Dragon Age series in general, like all of them.
Mhm.
I put Inquisition here because I think I had the most fun with Inquisition.
Okay.
But if you're talking about stories and all that, it might not just be Inquisition.
Yeah.
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 But I
Oh.
definitely feel like Inquisition. Well, I think Gaius knows this. I kind of like open world games as well.
Yeah.
And Inquisition
Mhm.
was definitely the most open world.
Absolutely.
And Inquisition had a lot more to it, in my opinion, that I liked. But at the same time, there was also stuff that I didn't like.
yeah.
But for
yeah.
example, Inquisition, I really enjoyed the dragon fights. The dragon fights were amazing.
Yes.
The dragon fights were amazing. The story wasn't too bad, to be honest. And but the characterization was a little weak, I must admit.
Yeah,
And
I do
think,
find the character
yeah.
development very weak.
and I think the characterization and the actual big storylines, the other games did it better.
Mhm.
But Inquisition has a lot going for it, in my opinion. I put Inquisition there, I know, but genuinely, I just meant like just
Dragon
Dragon
Age? Yeah,
just
Dragon
Dragon
Age
Age
is
in
Dragon in
general.
general.
Yeah.
Right.
Guys,
So
did you say number 2 was your favorite?
I like 2 more personally because I like I guess the key difference, I guess, between me, Max, and I, right? We both love story. We both love a good RPG. But I am very, very heavy into, like, if you have good character development, that almost like wins a good story for me. And maybe Max
Yeah.
is the opposite. I think that's probably the case. For me, 2 had much stronger characters, much more beloved characters, much
No, that's
stronger development. And in
Yep.
Inquisition, I felt like, to be honest, in Inquisition, you could kill off half of the characters. I'll be like, okay, whatever, right? In 2, I wouldn't lose a single character. I'll be like, nah, they're all surviving with me. I fucking love.
But
the
I think Inquisition kind of suffers a little bit from what Mass Effect suffers. Mass Effect 3 suffers from, which is that a
Yes.
lot of their characters are already established by then.
Yes.
And they just bring them back so they don't have to build on the characters. So for new players who, let's say, they just play Inquisition without prior knowledge, they would feel that some characters fall flat. Because actually the character growth is already done in the previous games. And I think this is a problem with just a lot of games in general where there's like more than one game that is like spanning the entire thing. Yeah.
It's hard to get into a base at one of the games out of a long series where they've really built up like 10 years of like love for the characters, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
That being said, though, it's not exactly like Mass Effect because Inquisition is standalone versus Mass Effect 3, which had started, from 1, obviously.
Well, actually, all the Dragon Age games are standalone, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so they're not like
No, they are with cameos from like
they have
it's
they have an overarching storyline that I would say is semi-connected, but the main character for each game changes, which is why I think you don't have as much attachment to it as like Shepard, for example. Because Shepard spans all games, so.
Yeah, you love Shepard. You love the characters who like fight.
You love your Shepard specifically.
Yeah, you love your Shepard.
Yeah.
The cool thing, though, I will say about Inquisition is seeing the old, like your Hawk from DA2 returning.
They all come back, yeah.
Yeah, hearing about your Warden from DA1. So, like, it's still linked in the sense that you do get to see your character that you made from DA2, which is awesome because you're like, holy shit, that's me, that's my character, that's my Hawk.
Oh, shit, okay.
Yeah, so he returns and shit, and then he fights with you for a bit and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's what Inquisition did really well in terms of like that awe factor, like fighting the dragons, how beautiful it looks, how like you see your cameos, you see Oregon and DAI is so hot.
Yeah,
Right?
I think the reason why there's that semi-connected story in Dragon Age, what I mean by that is that the choices that you make in the first few games
Yes,
still
yep.
carry over to the last
Yes,
one, even though
yes.
it's not a full big overarching story like Mass Effect. Yeah.
I do think though I have to agree with Max that in terms of like, let's say it was a standalone game, right? If I was just going to pick one of like, let's say I was going to recommend it to one, because Inquisition by far, Inquisition is almost like it has everything. You
Yeah.
have you have your god complex character who's basically the fucking Goku of the world. You have your dragon fights, you have your open world, you have your different like areas of the open world where they all are aesthetic as hell. You have your pretty strong cast of characters, varied cast of characters. You just have everything to it, and Inquisition is a really good game. I
Yeah.
just didn't. I mean, I just like too
I
much.
remember it's sad though, because I remember leading up to it, and I think you pre-ordered it, and the week leading up to it, you were so fucking excited. You were like, blah, 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 and you were just buzzing to fucking play it, and then you weren't very happy with the end result, were you?
When I finally got it, I got it on the PS3, and the PS3 quality for the Inquisition was not amazing. So I instantly got the PS4 for it, and when I play on PS4, it's like worlds apart, bro. Like honestly, it's like playing with like NVIDIA. Sorry, it's like playing with a GeForce graphics card versus Intel HD graphics, right? It's completely different.
Yeah.
It's so different. It's like, oh my god, there's textures. What? It's not just like the armor is not just blobs, So I got a PS4 for it, and then I finished it and stuff. But I will say Inquisition is made stronger by its DLCs. Like,
Yeah, that's for sure.
The
That's for
DLCs
sure.
make it a billion times stronger. Like honestly, it's a base game. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. Then you get like Trespasser DLC and all that, and then, oh my god, it changes it completely. It's so
Trespasser
much
is basically Trespasser is the Dragon Age version of Citadel.
yeah,
essentially.
it's so good.
Oh shit.
I mean, you know how highly I speak about Witcher 3's DLCs, right? I will honestly put Citadel and Trespasser on the same level as their DLCs.
Yeah.
Because they are that good. They are really that good. And it's very rare for me to like DLCs because, like you said, T, they're usually money grabs, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, Trespasser just brings the game to a different level. Citadel for ME3 is by far the best of the whole series. And so, yeah, no, definitely. I think it was made better with the DLCs when I played them. So, yeah. It got better, basically, is what I'm saying. Rather than, it's really good, bro.
There is actually another.
Really, really good.
There is another DLC in Inquisition. I cannot remember the name of it, but there is one that was usually overlooked because of Trespasser.
The dragon one, right?
No, the one that they go down into the deep roads.
Yes.
Inquisition. That one is actually also really good because from a lore perspective, from a world
really
lore
cool,
perspective, they actually exploded one. They basically took what you knew of a single part of the world lore and they kind of threw it out the window, and they were like, "Here's what it actually is." That also kind of blew my mind, and they actually did that with Inquisition a lot, and that was one thing I liked about it in terms of storytelling, where they took what you already knew established from the previous two games, and they didn't just throw it out like they didn't rewrite it like the way Blizzard did, where they are just like, oh, we just made it non-canon or whatever. They actually had a proper explanation to be like, this is why it's been misunderstood, this is the real thing. And that's why it's kind of like what they did with like the Ascians in Shadowbringers. So because of that, there was an aspect of like, whoa, okay, now you're talking.
Yeah, no, I actually do know exactly what you're talking about. It was a second DLC, wasn't it?
The second one, the Deep Roads one, yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I can't remember what it's called, but yeah.
It's really good.
No.
Isn't it called Deep Roads?
No, I don't know what it's called, but yeah, it's The Descent. There we go.
Yes, The Descent.
Yeah,
no, it is really good. I mean, if you guys have never played the Dragon Age series, try Inquisition. It's really good.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Because like,
DLCs.
I've been a bit quiet for like most of the 3x3 because it's a lot of RPGs, which I said initially I don't really like. But like Inquisition stuff, I've seen a bit of it, and I might actually pick it up since I have fucking 2 weeks now. Anyway,
sure.
Yeah.
I will say a lot of there are parts of Inquisition which feel needlessly like draggy, like
that's for sure. That's
100%.
There are certain areas in the world that you don't actually need to be there either.
We know which one.
No, there are a few. So I know what you mean. Some of them are just there kind of for the sake of making the world bigger.
Exactly, for making the world
necessary.
bigger. Yeah,
So I get what you mean.
Yeah, but I would say it's like probably not the easiest, but one of the best DAs to get into right now because graphics are decent still. You know, it's not
That's
like
the one,
DA1 or
exactly.
DA2 graphics.
Yeah.
It's open world, which is basically what all games are these days. So like, yeah, go for it. It's a good game, bro. I can't fault it just because it's not 9x9, like 3x3. It's really good. It's a really good game.
Damn. Okay.
Any kind of honorable mentions, Max, that you want
some
to
bonuses that you
Honorable
couldn't
mentions.
squeeze.
Hollow Knight, that's one.
Of course.
Good man.
Hollow Knight's amazing. What else do I have?
Also, actually, Hollow Knight. If we do a music 3x3, Hollow Knight's number one.
Hollow Knight
I
is
think for
definitely
that.
in there. Hollow Knight's definitely in there. Yeah.
There's like a YouTube video on this guy who like is like a really famous composer, and he analyzes the music and he talks about
I know
like,
the
all
one.
the different.
I know the
Oh
one.
my god, I fucking loved it. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Warhammer 40k, the original
My boy.
Dawn of War. The original Dawn of War.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Everyone clap! Well done! Well done! What a call!
That's the one I
okay.
regret not
Good
putting
What
in.
race though,
Yeah.
Max? What race?
I always liked Necrons and Tyranids.
Okay,
but
I could have said that. I could have
Tyranids
said that. It's
Tyranids
alright.
went in the game
Alright.
though. No, but there is a Tyranid mod for it, which is amazing.
Tyranids
Yeah.
is sick. Wait,
Yeah,
T, what
Tyranids
do you
is sick.
play then?
I'm basic as fuck, man. I'm Space Marines.
Yo, get out of here! What are you? What's wrong with you? All the races in the world and you choose humans? Like what?
Dude,
What?
it's the attachment from Dawn of War, man. It's just so fucking good.
I played the Tau.
Because
Yeah, the
Asian?
tower was
I
pretty
played
good
the
too.
Tau. Yeah, I was Tau and like it was.
I
I
like-
love the Necrons. They're so like they're not similar, but it's like oh yeah, they're playing Necrons.
I like
And then-
Necrons and Sisters of Battle, so
Oh,
Sisters of
nice.
Battle was
Sisters of
fucking
Battle was
sick, actually.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sisters of
Man,
Battle
it's
was
so
good.
good. Dawn
That's
of War's
Space Marines
so
on
good.
crack.
Let's see, what other games do I have
Just
that
get
I
serious.
I was
Yes,
kind of
yeah.
considering putting in Civ just because of the amount of time I put in Civ.
Wait, what?
Mm.
Civilizations.
Oh,
Civilization.
of course.
Yeah.
Because I just put so much time in that fucking
Civ
game.
is such a long game, man. You never start the game of Civ if you have to go somewhere because
Yeah,
Yeah, you just
it's like
you
10
just
hours
start-
gone.
no, it's not just 10 hours, it's like 24 hours gone the next thing, you know. Yeah.
Absolute insanity.
Let's see. I think there's probably like one or two more. I was considering if I wanted to put in Fire Emblem Three Houses because that one wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
and Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I was like,
Classic.
Seven remake
Nah,
is
I'm
good.
glad you didn't do the FF7 in there.
yeah, yeah.
It's so not cliche.
I
but
mean,
it's like so
I don't think I should put in FF7 also because the remake is not technically done yet.
Let me
Oh.
just
That's why I was like, yeah, let's just leave that one out.
fair enough.
Yeah,
fair
so
enough.
that's pretty much it. I think.
Nah,
I don't
this
think
is,
I have.
I love this
Yeah.
3x3. It's a very strong 3x3.
I just love finding out about like classic ones that you just didn't think about that definitely are like hit
Yeah.
close to home.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
Dawn of
yeah.
War, I
Like
completely
games you
forgot
forget
that.
and stuff. And
Yeah.
then
Dawn
you're
of War
like,
is-
oh, yeah.
so- Dawn of War is still one of my best games out there. Honestly.
Amen.
I
I
still
agree.
really like it.
I mean,
Yeah.
Dawn of War's so good. Dude, I mean,
Dawn of
like
War's
talking
really
about
good.
that, T. To be honest, when I was doing my, I was like, should I put the AC thing in there? And like, it wasn't that I forgot about it. I was so kind of like disillusioned by the more recent ones that I like basically was like, oh yeah, Ezio
Yeah.
Arc, right? Because Ezio Arc is so strong. But then
Amen.
everything after that was so bad. So like, I basically was like, oh, AC, write it off. You know what I mean?
Speaking of storytelling, there is one honorable mention, just one specific one. Bioshock
Oh,
Infinite.
here we go.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Bioshock
yes.
Infinite?
Yes.
Do you like
Yes.
Infinite?
Yes.
Does it
Yes.
like Infinite more
Only
than
Infinite. Only Infinite.
you don't like
Oh,
Rapture?
you don't like the OG3?
Well,
No,
wait.
I mean, I don't hate it. I don't hate it, but I'm just saying that if you really want from a storytelling perspective, it would be Infinite.
Infinite
Yeah.
storytelling is so good.
I thought
Boom,
I
yeah,
thought
it's
the
so
original
good.
was better.
You just
like-
want to call people daddy, Raymond.
No, it's
Rapture's not bad. Don't get me wrong. Rapture's not bad.
the whole ideal. Like I
You
do
do like you love the Rapture, don't you, Ray? You love
Yeah.
the
He
wants to
Rapture
be
wanna
daddy.
do-
It was
yeah,
actually scary compared to
Yeah.
Infinite.
Yeah.
That is
But I
true.
guess Infinite wasn't made to be scary, maybe. Like
Infinite
that
wasn't made to
kinda
be scary,
right?
yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I
Infinite
mean?
wasn't made to be scary.
It's like comparing like Dead Space with like I don't know Assassin's Creed or like Spyro and being like Spyro wasn't scary, but it wasn't kind of like made for it. I don't know which one I would prefer. I do like Infinite more because it's more aesthetic and like you know it's like nicer. But Rapture is fucking sick. I actually love
Rapture's
it.
yeah, Rapture's
It's
great.
fucking
Rapture's cool.
sick, bro.
Rapture's great.
Like there is a fear of like when you're going in and you're like, oh my god, I'm never making up. There's like the innate fear of like drowning. You know what I mean? Of
Yeah.
like, oh my god, this is fucking scary.
It's not just drowning. It's also because like the actual characterizations, like the big
Mm.
daddies and the little sisters, are
Oh
all
my god, the
actually
little
fucking
sisters are
terrifying.
so
They are terrifying.
The
God.
spices as well.
Scary.
Or like
Oh yeah, the
Yeah,
spicers as well. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
fucking terrifying.
Man, I
PTSD.
kind of want to play a lot of these games again, man.
There are a few more that now that I'm scrolling down my Steam list, I kind of realized that there might be a few more.
I
as
know
well, so-
exactly what you mean. Like after that, when
Yeah.
I scroll on my Steam, I was like, "Oh my god, I forgot to talk about this. I forgot to talk about that." There's so many
Mhm.
good games out there. We're living in such a great like. I mean, can you imagine if we were like I don't know, 40 years earlier? We only have like Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, there wouldn't be
Whatever was
there would be many games up there. There would be any
Yeah.
choices.
Quake.
But then
Quake
again,
was some
you
shit.
will be
Oh
able
my
to
God.
relive the first time you played, like, I don't know, StarCraft 1 and you saw fucking like
Yeah. StarCraft
Territory.
was one of yeah.
yeah, man, come on.
StarCraft was my
Who-
honorable mention.
Who was that Protoss who was like a god who started as a zealot and then like
Phoenix.
fucked up-
Phoenix.
Yes, Phoenix. Come on, he
Korean.
was so cool. And then you see how the Brood Queen. Oh my god, so good. StarCraft was so good.
Okay, last
Oh.
mention. Last mention.
Yes.
Saints Row. Saints Row.
What?
Saints
Saints
Row.
Row.
that's it.
You Saints Row?
Really?
I love
Never
Saints
That's
Row.
the
would've guessed
last
that.
game I thought you would talk about, man.
What?
Honestly.
Well, Saints Row is more of just like
Mindless
stupid
fun. Yeah,
it's just
stupid
stupid
fun.
fun.
Yeah,
It's just
stupid fun.
stupid
That
fun.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's all.
Very
It's
nice,
just
very
stupid fun.
nice.
Because 1
I
and
will-
2
I-
was more like GTA, and 3 was like
Yeah. And then
I
3
will
and 4 were
say,
just
yeah.
stupid fun. So.
stupid. Yeah.
I think Ray and I had one of the funniest sessions on Saints Row ever. I can agree with that. We like, I've never laughed so hard as what I did when we played Saints Row and just fucked around. Like nothing. It wasn't even anything. It was just everything was funny about it. It was just a stupid game. No, Saints Row is fun. Saints Row is really, really fun. But
Yeah.
I do still stand by the fact that I never thought you would say Saints Row.
Yeah, what the
but-
fuck?
No, I know. That
It's,
was probably one of the more.
I
unexpected.
guess even Dungeon Masters need a good game, like a chill game to play.
Mindless fucking game.
Well, it is good to play Saints Row to know how to do over the top stupid shit in case it needs to happen in game because sometimes players do think of stupid shit and then
Yeah,
if you play Saints Row you know how to describe it to them in that comical way that they want you to,
Yeah,
which also helps.
fair enough.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Oh,
it
actually,
also helps.
I have a rogue question. What's your thoughts on God of War, Max?
The PS4 one.
Both,
We
I
can
guess,
go the
the
original
franchise.
series as well as the 2018 one.
Okay, the PS4 one is the one that I haven't really played yet. I want to. I haven't really played yet. Yeah, and the beginning, the ones that the early ones, the PS3 and PS2 ones, those were those were also kind of like mindless fun because they just hack and slash and killing away. The story wasn't really important. I heard good things about the PS4 one. I have yet to play it, and when I think when I first started to play that one, I was not in the right state of mind. So the beginning did feel a bit too slow for me. So I want to try it again. I just haven't had the time. Yeah, I just haven't had the time.
If you give me the address, I'll ship over my PS4 and God of War for you.
No, I have it. I have a PS4 and God of War. I just haven't had the time. I just haven't had the time. That's all. Yeah, I just
Like
haven't
just
had the time.
wants people to back him up.
No.
It's the fact that I don't like God of War.
No,
It's a game that I want to play because my girlfriend also speaks quite highly of it. So I do want to play it. I just haven't played it yet. Yeah.
It's but you're absolutely right. If you're not in the right mindset, it's a very weird game to play if you're not ready.
Which
for
is
it.
why the first few times I tried it, I couldn't. So I want to wait till I feel like it, and then I will play
When
it,
you-
and then I'll probably enjoy it as well.
when you're like craving it. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Nice.
I think we're about close to the 2-hour mark, or probably a bit over.
I think we're
Before we
over.
wrap up this podcast, Max, please shout out your socials. Please shout out your store so that our listeners can, find
Oh
you.
well,
Or find your
if you
store, at least.
if you're from Singapore, please go visit Table Minis, TABLE Table, and Minis as in miniatures, MINIS. That's where I run my professional DM games. That's where you can also have your first taste of D&D if you want to play it. My own socials, I have a Dungeon Master Instagram. Don't really update it as much nowadays, but that's just Dungeon Master Maximilian. So then Dungeon
Nice.
Master and then MAXIMILIN. That's my name. Yeah. And
Yep.
then if you want to follow me on the personal one, you can't. So don't try. If you
Don't do that. Don't be a creep. Don't be a creep.
if you want to do Twitter,
Max.
Oh,
Oh, he got.
We lost Max.
We'll,
Twitter.
We
It's
lost
alright.
Max
We'll see if he comes back.
because he insulted everyone.
it's
But,
because
to be fair, we're wrapping up anyway. So that's Dungeon Master Maximilian. I don't really think he uses Twitter much, but I will link it in
Yeah,
our.
we'll attach the socials.
Yeah, we'll attach your socials. Hey, welcome back, Max. I'm
Welcome
just saying
back.
that I'll attach your Twitter into our socials.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll tag you in it.
Twitter is just Max Tadashi, MaxTadashii. Yes.
Yep. Perfect.
Perfect.
So we'll
Basically-
we'll put all these into our
Yes,
Our
yes.
Twitter,
links
and we'll put it
stuff.
in the description and everything as well. So if you ever want to check Max out, just click in the description below, and it'll bring you right towards him.
Oh,
Nice.
so with
I-
that,
I
sorry,
eventually want to create like a Discord for my own world and stuff, but we'll see how that goes.
that would be cool.
Yeah,
You should do
that'd
that.
be
And
cool.
we would love
Yeah.
that as well. And then we can play more games. All right. So on that, I think we should probably wrap up this podcast before we hit into the 3-hour mark. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you, Max, so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
We,
Max.
we are
Very
we
welcome.
are incredibly excited for
Very welcome.
the next episode 2 weeks from now. We
Yeah.
are actually going to be playing D&D, so stay tuned because there's going to be some shenanigans that will be going down. I guarantee it.
We'll be
till, like,
testing Max's Dungeon Master skills to the limit.
No, we'll be fine. I'll be fine.
Yeah,
Those degenerates.
I'm pretty sure we'll be pushing Max to the limits of degeneracy. Not
I'll
of his
be
limits
fine.
as a dungeon master, just degeneracy. I mean, let's be honest, Ray's probably going to get naked within the first play. I don't know why, he just will. It's what's going to happen. So expect a lot of nudity, a lot of swearing, and a lot of fucking top fun. But do stay tuned for the next episode. Please follow us on all our socials. Raymond, you want to take us away with that?
Yep. So we are on Facebook as facebook.com/Shumimasen. Twitter, that's at Shumimasen Pod, and on YouTube as well. Those can be all found on our home site. That's anchor.fm/Shumimasen, like anchor, like the ship anchor. And you can find us all on that. Give us a like, follow, and subscribe to keep up to date with our latest tweets, our latest hot takes, and our latest episodes, so you don't miss a single one. That's about it in that regard. T, you got anything to say?
No, that's fantastic wrapping up.
Cool.
Okay.
Any
Yeah.
words, Max, for our listeners?
Play D&D, man. That's all I can say, man.
Good enough.
Play D&D.
That's good.
Play
Words
it.
to live
Stay
by.
tuned for the
Play
next
D&D,
one, and we'll
guys.
convince you the full way.
Go play
Alright.
D&D.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you later.
See ya.
That's all, guys. Take it
Bye.
easy.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.